The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. We were a couple $1,000s short of our goal yesterday, like the day before, like on virtually all but 2 days out of this is the third week of our fundraising drive, and I need your help. We've got to hit these goals. We've got to keep this show on the air. We've got to keep this network going. It's just like we've got to do it, and it costs money to send electrons up to satellites and back down to you, regardless of where you're getting the show, even on YouTube. There are expenses involved, and bills have to be paid. And if the bills don't get paid, then the electricity gets turned off. It's really that simple. So 877-378-8669 is our telephone number for Free Speech, or is Free Speech TV's telephone number. Also on their website, freespeech.org/donate. And we need your help. We need to make this network solid. This is the funding base for Free Speech TV. And, it's how we've done it for years and years. And so far it's worked. So far we've kind of hung on in there, And we're getting some really good results, by the way. I mean, you've got a Democratic socialist who just beat Joe Crowley. Joe Crowley, who's been on this show. Joe Crowley, who was one of the first Democrats to come out for Medicare for all, but was still taking money from big corporations. And, she came in and she said, no, I'm not going to do that. Boom, Joe Crowley's gone. The genuine progressive revolution that you see on this network is actually succeeding at taking over the Democratic Party, one seat at a time. We're doing it. We took over the platform in 2016 and pushed Hillary Clinton way to the left. Not far enough that, unfortunately, that she could win the election. But, well, actually, she did win the election. She got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. And you know that whole story. I don't want to get into that. But the whole, and it wasn't Hillary, it was that whole machine, but which is continuing to move to the left. I mean, look at Tom Perez now. And so I see what we're doing as vital, as important, and as successful. We are changing the dialogue in the Democratic Party. You are changing the dialogue in the Democratic Party. I know this. This is why Mark Pocan comes back on this program every single week. It's why Bernie came back every single week. This show arguably launched Bernie's candidacy. It certainly turned him into a household name all across the country. There are literally millions of people listening to this program over the course of weeks over the course of a week. In fact, according to Talkers Magazine, it's 5.6 million on the radio just. And then, here we are on Free Speech TV. We are changing things. We are having success. Let's not let this thing fail now. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number for Free Speech TV. Please call now. Contributions of any amount are more than welcome, whatever you can give. And if you can commit to a certain amount of money every month, all the better. It's a great way to make a small monthly gift go a long, long way, because it really and truly does add up. The premiums are what we've had all week. The Free Speech TV is a true, did you hear that on Fox News Magnet with the $30 gift, with the $72 gift, the Free Speech TV water bottle. It's hard to find these water bottles that are actually made in the United States and that are chemical free. This one's really cool. It's why it's $72. It's actually a little more expensive premium for Free Speech TV, as opposed to a cheapy one, made in China or something. With a $120 donation, you get a copy of my book, the Thom Hartmann Reader, collection of various writings pulled out of others of my books. And it's a great way to introduce me and my perspective to your friends, neighbors, teachers, students, whatever it may be. And a great gift. That's with a $120 gift or $10 a month for a year. With a $240 gift or $20 a month for a year, you get Howard Zinn's A People's History book, plus the DVD that goes with it, plus Reverend William Barber's book, The Third Reconstruction. That could be $20 a month. With $360 gift or $30 a month for a year, you get all the books and the DVDs. My book, Reverend Barber's book, Howard Zinn's book, the DVD with a $480 gift or $40 a month for a year. You get the Everything Kit, which includes Fox News Magnet, water bottle, autographed book by me, William Barber's book, Howard Zinn's book, and the DVD. And with $1,000, come to Portland, and I'll take you to lunch. And you can sit here in the studio with us and watch the last hour of our program. It's kind of a hoot. Our studio is really a funky little humble thing, and but it's really worth seeing. So 877-378-8669. Please call now. Act now and get this T-shirt.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And boy, big news. And let's start with Congressman Mark Pocan. It is Wednesday. It is our first hour. It is Middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, representing the 2nd District of Wisconsin. His website, pocan.house.gov. His Twitter handle, Rep. Mark Pocan. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Hey, everyone.
Congressman? Hello?
Here I am. Sorry, Tom.
That's
Thank
quite
you.
right.
Thanks for having me here. Sorry about that. I had the mute button on.
Oh, that can be dangerous. Great to have you back. So we've got, election victories from a very progressive candidate in New York State to medical marijuana in Oklahoma, I think it is, or Montana, and to what may be the first, openly gay governor of Colorado if Jared Polis wins. I mean, a lot of stuff going on there. And on top of that, we've got the Supreme Court apparently dancing to the tune now of this Illinois industrialist, Richard Uihlein, is it how it's pronounced? He's the guy who...
Uihlein.
Uihlein, okay. He's the guy who backs the Liberty Justice Center, which represents Mark Janus. He sent out flyers back in 2016 to workers in Illinois, government workers in Illinois, saying that they shouldn't have to pay their fair share fee of standard union dues, et cetera. So anyhow, let me toss it to you.
Yeah, it's a real mixed day, right? Lots going on. 2 Supreme Court decisions in 2 days that have been very negative, showing the power of having the Supreme Court and the power of the Senate in holding up an appointment for President Obama and then putting Mr. Gorsuch in to fill the court vacancy now. 5-4 decisions. Janus especially hard as a union member for nearly 3 decades and someone who's been through the Wisconsin experience attacking public employee unions. This is, again, out of their political playbook, as you mentioned. Richard Uihlein owns Uline, a shipping supply company, Uline, which I'll bet you a lot of your listeners may actually buy from. Every time they buy from them, the person who benefits is Richard Uihlein, who, as you mentioned, uses his money to destroy unions and to fund Republican candidates. I think he's put $5 or $6 million already in against Tammy Baldwin, our U.S. Senator from Wisconsin. So something people should definitely keep in mind.
Here's the kicker, by the way. In the New York Times, they're reporting on a study that was done some years ago where they found, and I quote, the Democratic share of the presidential vote dropped by an average of 3.5 percentage points state after state after the passage of so-called right-to-work laws.
Yeah. Well, and you're going to see people unable to have a collective voice in their workplace to talk about safety and working conditions, to talk about their wages and benefits at a time, Tom, that last year we had increases in union membership, and polling among millennials shows some of the highest support for unions ever. So the Supreme Court decision is counter to where the America is at, where the American people are at, but certainly in line with the billionaires like Dick Uihlein who helped fund these efforts like the Janus case. So that's a really bad result. And then the Muslim ban being upheld yesterday was a really bad result of the courts. But as you mentioned, progressive seems to be doing well. People who are coming out to vote want to see change from the direction of this country. And the change they want to see is bold change, bold progressive change, which is something that we've been saying as the Progressive Caucus to our Democratic leadership colleagues, that if we really want to be as effective as possible and win as many seats as possible, we better talk about big, bold, progressive ideas, or else, I think one of the complaints out there is that, you don't want to be just a little better. You want to be actually improving people's lives in a substantive and noticeable way.
Yeah, and our lines are filling up, so I just have one other quick question for you. It makes me crazy when I hear things that are simply not true said on television and nobody challenges it. For example, yesterday, over and over, Trump said, Republicans want to secure the country, Democrats want open borders and more crime. There is no Democrat that I know of in the entire party who wants open borders or more crime. It's a simple lie, but nobody ever said, oh, the president's lying again. But it makes me even more crazy when the talent themselves, the reporters and commentators, say these things. This morning on Stephanie Ruhl's program on MSNBC, she got into a conversation with 2 Republicans, or former Republicans, I guess, Elise Jordan and Steve Schmidt. And about this young woman who, what's her name? I'm going to have to learn it here, who just won in New York, who beat Joe Crowley.
Alexandria.
Yeah, Alexandria. And she said she's one of these far lefty, I'm paraphrasing here, she's one of those far lefties who wants to give people free education and free health care and free this and free that, and they have no plan to pay for it. And they all agreed. And she said, these are not progressives, these are lying progressives. And my recollection is that the Congressional Progressive Caucus, year after year after year, has produced a budget that actually does offer free education, free health care, and does pay for it. Do I have that right? Was Stephanie Ruhle full of whatever you want to call it this morning?
Yeah, and add on top of it, we actually also reduce the deficit more than the Republicans and Democrats do in their versions of the budget. So we actually accomplish a whole lot in our version. Something you said, Tom, I really want to, I just introduced a bill to get rid of ICE. And I've had lots of conservatives, you can imagine, speaking out. I was on Fox and Friends this morning, and Brian on there put out some of that same misinformation. We don't care about the borders. ICE doesn't protect the borders. The Border Patrol does. We're not saying to go after the Border Patrol, but what ICE has been become is the president's police force, where instead of, it was created after 9/11, protecting us from terrorists, now it's going after, doctors from Poland and Michigan, and going after people with parking tickets at churches and workplaces, so that Donald Trump can justify his walls, so he can go to his rallies and get the admiration from his supporters, at least the racist, xenophobic element of his supporters. So, you're right. They put a lot of misinformation out, and we're doing a lot to try to put the correct information out there.
Wow, I didn't realize that there was that much of a separation between the Border Patrol and ICE. I thought they were, basically different dimensions of the same entity.
No, that's the thing. I mean, ICE is the rest of the interior of the U.S. where they go after.
Right.
Originally, again, it was done after 9/11, so the whole idea was to protect the country from terrorism. There's other duties, human trafficking, drugs gangs, which also the FBI and the Department of Justice also do. So it's not like you're not going to have those functions. But the reality is, at the Head Start program in my district, in one of the cities in my district, ICE was hanging out in the parking lot, scaring people away from having their kids get an education. That is Donald Trump's vision of ICE, but it's not the American vision of ICE. He's so damaged the brand that ICE can no longer be effective in doing what they're doing. So, but again, so much misinformation.
But they've got a hell of a lot of money and a lot of guns.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Okay, let's pick up some phone calls here. Omar in Herndon, Virginia. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Yes, Mr. Pocan, Thom Hartmann, greeting to you. Well, my question is that I really think we are under attack. Our check and balances that the founding fathers put in place are falling. We have a president breaking the law. Congress now holds him accountable, and the Supreme Court going along with him. My question to you, if we win the House and the Senate, do we have a game plan to reverse everything that this president did?
Well,
and I'd like to add to that question, if I may, Congressman, before you answer it. The Judiciary Act of 1869, right? This is an old piece of legislation, but it's on the books right now. Says, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States Congress assembled that the Supreme Court of the United States shall hereafter, not may, shall hereafter consist of the Chief Justice of the United States and 8 Associate Justices, any 6 of whom shall constitute a quorum. And for the purposes of this act, there shall be appointed an additional Associate Justice of said court. Those are shalls. Didn't Mitch McConnell break the law?
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely, Tom, on that one. And, that's why they did it, to hold out on some of these decisions. And that's
Is there going to be any effort to prosecute Mitch McConnell for breaking the law?
Well, I don't know about that, but I think to the caller's question, to Omar's question specifically, Tom, if we take the House back, if we take the Senate back, we still have a Republican president. So we can certainly lay out an agenda and take votes that show the American people what we could do if you have different people in control. But the main thing you're going to get is a goalie. We're going to be able to stop many of the bad things that would otherwise happen legislatively. We'll be able to open up investigations where necessary, because this administration certainly has given us lots of things to look at that they're doing improperly. But at the end of the day, it's going to be hard to actually see some of that legislation directly become law because we still have a Republican president. So a lot of good will happen should we flip the majorities in 2018, but we still have 2020 to look down as well.
Yeah, amen. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls on Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. It's coming up on 16 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. You can find his website at pocan.house.gov, and you can tweet him, and please do say hi and pass the good word along at Rep. Mark Pocan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
That's Rep like Representative, R-E-P, Mark, M-A-R-K, Pocan, P-O-C-A-N. Rep. Mark Pocan is his Twitter handle. Welcome back. Let me just quickly see who's here we go. Okay, Jeff in St. Louis. Jeff, do you have a question for Congressman Pocan?
Yeah, I'm got a statement to make, actually. It seems like...
Okay, for Congressman Pocan or just in general?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would like to hear his comment back to me on it.
Sure.
It has to do with trade war. It seems like Trump's trying to break our economy and separate us from our U.S. allies. He's also not willing to protect our upcoming elections. And from what I heard from Lee Camp, he's using 121 bombs a day. That's about one every 12 minutes to bomb Al-Qaeda or whoever. But he's depleting our military supplies. It seems like he's setting us up for Russia.
Okay, Congressman?
Well, I think on the trade war, part of the problem, since that's the first thing you brought up, let me talk about that, is, this president is definitely shooting from the hip. So, we've had free traders, we've had fair traders. Those are the main two kind of ideological areas when it comes to trade. And then you have President Trump, who doesn't apparently have a trade policy, but he's throwing out tariffs via Twitter and in other ways. And, generally, I don't have anything against targeted tariffs. I think they can be used very effectively. But generally, they're used against countries that violate the rules, not that don't. So when European Union and Canada is affected and, we're allowing, companies in China to get away with things, that's counter to what at least he said he's for. But we don't know exactly what he's for, which is why this has been terribly confusing for companies, terribly confusing for other countries. And, whether that's to help Russia, I'm not sure. I just think he doesn't know what he doesn't know, but he still acts on it, and then his administration implements the policies that sometimes clearly don't make sense, whether it be from the border or trade or other areas.
But they do work on television. I mean, this whole reality star president thing seems to be working for him, at least with his base.
I'll tell you, this morning the cab driver, I was in a cab, and he was telling me, and I didn't expect him to be a Trump person. He wasn't, but he said, well, the president does his own thing, and that's what they kind of like, that he's independent like that. The problem is the president doesn't know what he's doing when he's independent, and some of his actions cause our country a whole lot of other problems that are going to have to be untangled way more than you put out in a tweet. And we've got this on trade right now. It's a classic example. We don't know what his policies are. Other countries don't. But these tariffs are just kind of thrown out there without any rhyme or reason, and we're having a very difficult time because now retaliatory tariffs come. Harley-Davidson, Wisconsin says, okay, now we're going to make motorcycles overseas because of the tariffs coming in, and no one really knows if he's serious about the tariffs or not because it's Donald Trump. It's just a whole lot of mess with this president.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like an awful lot of this, we've got 15 seconds to the break, an awful lot of this is also designed to help Donald Trump himself. The GOP tax scam, for example, saved his family presumably hundreds of millions if he's worth anything close to what he says.
Yeah, and the Emoluments Clause issue is something we could talk about for an entire hour.
Yeah. So this is doing it his own way. Doing it his own way is what he's done his entire life. Basically get as much as he can for himself and his family. Amazing. Congressman Mark Pocan with us taking your calls. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan. It's coming up on 21 minutes past the hour.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. It's our Middays with Mark hour. Congressman Mark Pocan on the line taking your calls. And Stephen in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Stephen, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Congressman Pocan, thank you for your time that you do every week for our program here. One of the questions I have for you is this recent ruling by the Supreme Court on concerning labor, is this going to essentially make all of the states right-to-work states?
No. So what the decision does is specifically it affects public employee unions, so teachers, firefighters, public employees, city, county, and state level. What it's saying is how they collect their dues and how they currently organize. They're not going to be able to have someone pay dues or pay a fee to essentially still be represented by the union. So the union still has to represent these people, but they don't have to. They're not able to collect any fee for that. So basically, people will be freeloading. So obviously, more people will not pay any dues or any fees whatsoever. The union still has to do the work to represent them. They're freeloaders, and that's going to hurt the union and hurt their ability.
And this is every state in the country?
Every state in the country.
And
exactly.
Would this include police
every
unions?
Local unit of government. Pardon?
Would it also include police unions?
It should be. Police and fire, I believe, is also included in this. In fact, we're still kind of learning some aspects of it around retroactivity, too, which could be very serious. So, but it affects public employee unions, so it doesn't affect private unions. You already have many states with right-to-work laws anyway, which, again, have been problems. But this is why we have to have something like the Workplace Democracy Act, which I've introduced in the House with 58 co-sponsors so far, and Senator Sanders has introduced in the Senate with about a dozen co-sponsors. This is a way to allow it so that simple majority vote, you can have a union, stops the delays in putting a union together once you've won an election, gets rid of right-to-work laws in every single state in the country. That bill should be the goal, I think, for Democrats as we're moving forward.
Would that bill be considered unconstitutional under this ruling?
No, I don't think so, because, again, how we're moving forward with it, we would get rid of the right-to-work laws. We'll have to take a look at it, the Tom, that just came out. But I think, again, legislatively, we would be able to put that in place.
You could also put a court stripping provision into it. Cite Article 3, Section 2, where it says that the Supreme Court is subject to congressional, I forget the word, but basically Congress can tell the Supreme Court what to do or not to do. And so you can put a sentence into a bill that says the Supreme Court may not review this bill. You can forbid judicial review. In fact, the last person to do that, I think, was Tom Udall, Tom, what's his name? Who used to be the head of the Senate, from North Dakota.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah,
anyway, yeah. So that's anyway. Let's get back to our callers. I'm sorry, I'm getting into these conversations. Andrew in New York City, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I have a modest suggestion, or a possible suggestion. You can impeach people other than the president. How about Scott Pruitt? How about a privileged motion to impeach Scott Pruitt for abuse of power and for violating federal law? Probably won't get through, but it would make Republicans vote on whether they think Scott Pruitt should be removed from office. and it would create at least an interesting talking point for progressive candidates.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think we already are making that point, especially around someone like Pruitt, who is so awful. The problem is, again, while we could get a vote that's going to go nowhere because we don't have the majority, I think we're trying to focus on November, where we can try to get the majority to pass some of these things. I don't think Republicans would join efforts to impeach any of the administration officials, even someone like Pruitt or Betsy DeVos, who clearly is not competent to be a Secretary of Education, which is, again, why we're focused really on November. We're certainly pointing out when Pruitt or DeVos or anyone does really damaging things or really stupid things to try to make the point. But, ultimately we have to have a majority if we're going to get this done, because Republicans are refusing to join us on what would be otherwise reasonable votes like impeachment.
Yeah, it seems that having that majority, I'm just looking at these progressive victories. I'm encouraged, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the American people are where progressives are at, right? What we got to make sure is that, as we elect a few more conservative Democrats, we don't let them claim we have to do everything they want because they happen to win a seat. Bottom line is the American people are with us, and it's those progressive votes that got those people across the finish line as well.
Right. Amen. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
You can check out Congressman Pocan's website at pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. We were a couple $1,000s short of our goal yesterday, the day before, on virtually all but 2 days out of this is the third week of our fundraising drive, and I need your help. We've got to hit these goals. We've got to keep this show on the air. We've got to keep this network going. It's just like we've got to do it, and it costs money to send electrons up to satellites. And back down to you, regardless of where you're getting the show, even on YouTube, there are expenses involved, and bills have to be paid. And if the bills don't get paid, then the electricity gets turned off. It's really that simple. So 877-378-8669 is our telephone number for Free Speech, or is Free Speech TV's telephone number. Also on their website, freespeech.org/donate. And we need your help. We need to make this network solid. This is the funding base for Free Speech TV. And, it's how we've done it for years and years. And so far it's worked. So far we've kind of hung on in there, And we're getting some really good results, by the way. You've got a Democratic socialist who just beat Joe Crowley. Joe Crowley, who's been on this show. Joe Crowley, who was one of the first Democrats to come out for Medicare for all, but was still taking money from big corporations. And, she came in and she said, no, I'm not going to do that. Boom, Joe Crowley's gone. The genuine progressive revolution that you see on this network is actually succeeding at taking over the Democratic Party. One seat at a time. We're doing it. We took over the platform in 2016 and pushed Hillary Clinton way to the left. Not far enough that, unfortunately, that she could win the election. But, actually, she did win the election. She got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. And you know that whole story. I don't want to get into that. But the whole, and it wasn't Hillary, it was that whole machine, But which is continuing to move to the left. Look at Tom Perez now. And so I see what we're doing as vital, as important, and as successful. We are changing the dialogue in the Democratic Party. You are changing the dialogue in the Democratic Party. I know this. This is why Mark Pocan comes back on this program every single week. It's why Bernie came back every single week. This show arguably launched Bernie's candidacy. It certainly turned him into a household name all across the country. There are literally millions of people listening to this program over the course of weeks it's over the course of a week. In fact, according to Talkers Magazine, it's 5.6 million on the radio just. And then, here we are on Free Speech TV. We are changing things. We are having success. Let's not let this thing fail now. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number for Free Speech TV. Please call now. Contributions of any amount are more than welcome, whatever you can give. And if you can commit to a certain amount of money every month, all the better. It's a great way to make a small monthly gift go a long, long way, because it really and truly does add up. The premiums are what we've had all week. The Free Speech TV, is it true? Did you hear that on Fox News Magnet with the $30 gift, with the $72 gift, the Free Speech TV water bottle? It's hard to find these water bottles that are actually made in the United States and that are chemical free. This one's really cool. It's why it's $72. It's actually a little more expensive premium for Free Speech TV, as opposed to a cheapy one, made in China or something. With a $120 donation, you get a copy of my book, the Thom Hartmann Reader, collection of various writings pulled out of others of my books. And it's a great way to introduce me and my perspective to your friends, neighbors, teachers, students, whatever it may be. And a great gift. That's with a $120 gift or $10 a month for a year. With a $240 gift or $20 a month for a year, you get Howard Zinn's A People's History book, plus the DVD that goes with it, plus Reverend William Barber's book, The Third Reconstruction. That could be $20 a month. With $360 gift or $30 a month for a year, you get all the books and the DVDs. My book, Reverend Barber's book, Howard Zinn's book, the DVD with a $480 gift or $40 a month for a year. You get the Everything Kit, which includes Fox News Magnet, water bottle, autographed book by me, William Barber's book, Howard Zinn's book, and the DVD. And with $1,000, come to Portland, and I'll take you to lunch. And you can sit here in the studio with us and watch the last hour of our program. It's kind of a hoot. Our studio is really a funky little humble thing, and but it's really worth seeing. So 877-378-8669. Please call now. Act now and get this T-shirt. Welcome back. It's Middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the day. And Jerry in Tifton, Georgia, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM.
Congressman Pocan.
Yes.
Congressman Pocan. Hey, Gary Gentry, Tifton, Georgia. I retired from the auto industry 32 and a half years, UAW member for most of that. I was a trained UAW organizer. I worked in 2 right-to-work states, Georgia and Tennessee. In my opinion, and some of my union brothers and sisters will disagree with that, especially if they've never worked in a right-to-work state, the two most dangerous things about the right-to-work law is that the union has to represent people who don't pay dues, and if they don't, or the person feels they weren't represented to the same level, both the union and the union representative as an individual can be sued. In my opinion, you won't have union members dropping out of the union and paying dues if those 2 provisions, you could have a national right to work and take those 2 provisions out of the law, our unions will expand because they'll provide great service as they already do to the members, and it'll kill the sting of the right-to-work laws from the right.
No, absolutely. In fact, what we've seen in Wisconsin, and across the country, really, when you have a right-to-work happen, despite more states doing it, we've had increased union membership, right? So in the other areas, because people value what unions are doing. And, this particular provision is really about freeloaders. It's people who don't want to pay anything in but get the benefit of the union, but don't want to pay anything towards it because they're claiming it's going to go to a political purpose, which is absolute BS. But the courts went that way in a 5-4 decision, and a very partisan decision, which is great for all the billionaires, the multimillionaires that don't want to pay their workers well and don't want to worry about working conditions. In this particular case, it's public employees. But, this is an attack over and over and over again until they get what they want across the country, which is bad news for working families.
Mary in Ouray, Colorado, excuse me. Am I saying your town right, Mary?
Yes, it's Ouray.
Ouray, okay. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you. Back in 2001, Dennis Kucinich introduced a bill to create a Department of Peace, and followed with every year with that. And then Mark Dayton wanted to make it a cabinet-level position. Is there any chance the progressives could pick that up with all the money spent on the Defense Department? It would be a tiny fraction to have a Department of Peace at some kind of level. Maybe they have it now. I don't think so.
I think most of our efforts, Mary, have been, on trying to, like when we put our Progressive Caucus budget out, we show that you can trim spending on defense and invest it in things that actually benefit people across the country in a greater way. And by doing that, we're trying to show people that there are alternatives. So rather than, a department and using that as the talking point, I think we've been trying to do it through budgetary ways, because we show the direct relation to less spending on defense means more spending on education, health care, all the other areas that we'd like to highlight that people would say, oh, yeah, that's a benefit that'll help me. So the focus, I think, as of late has been on that because it kind of goes a little stronger in that we still spend plenty on defense regardless, but just by cutting back on some of that money, it's going to go to programs that people really value, and I think it's the best way right now that we have to illustrate why we spend too much on defense and how we could cut back on some of the things we're doing. I
would also argue that the Department of State should be considered the Department of Peace, essentially. The State,
right?
That's the State Department's job, is diplomacy.
Right.
So, Jack in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Jack, you're on the air with Congressman.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. I have to say that I was completely gobsmacked when I saw Democratic pundits and party leaders attacking anybody who would try to say to Sarah Sanders, look, we don't accept what you're doing. You're lying up there and you can't have dinner in peace. No Democrat has ever threatened anybody physically. They've simply said what they felt. And I wonder if that notion of civility and politeness that the Dems have lived by helped to bring about Gorsuch, because they were too polite to actually fight the GOP for not allowing Obama his pick. And one more example, Gore stepping out of the fight when the Supreme Court gave the presidency to Bush. Do you think that's something we should think about?
So I would take it in two different issues I think you're bringing up. One is, should we fight harder and sometimes, fight as they'll stick on their position forever if they need to. We need to be tougher on that, yes, and I think that relates to your examples. I think even Maxine Waters has said, in her comments, I think that's what you're referring to, it's all about peaceful protest. No one's, suggesting violence or anything, although Donald Trump certainly has in multiple of his rallies and other statements. But we can be tough without, talking about violence, and certainly Maxine didn't do that. But, of course, Fox and all the pundits, out there that now want to now spin this into a different story. So that's what Maxine said. That's not what she said. But we should be as tough as they have proven to be in many cases. And I think, that's a fair criticism.
Okay. Jim in Trumansburg, New York. Jim, you're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Hi, guys. Thanks for your program. I got a simple question here. With these new GOP tax cuts, will the FDIC be affected?
Can you explain a little more what you're asking?
The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation?
Yeah, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation.
How would the tax cuts affect that, Jim?
Yeah, well, they when the last time the 2008 crash happened, Obama increased the federal insurance from, I don't know, was it 150,000 to 250,000? And to support these tax cuts, they're starting to rob money from, or it seems like they want to rob money from Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid.
Oh, so are they depleting the funds in the FDIC? Is that your question?
Yeah. Could they go after it?
Okay.
I got you. So I think, clearly they passed the tax cuts, adding trillions to the debt without funding them, right? That's a tax expenditure. So they prioritized that. And then literally days later, Paul Ryan said, oh, my God, we have got a huge debt. We got to go after entitlements, as if like he forgot what he did days earlier. So they've suggested things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, but obviously everything could be up for grabs. And just based on the attacks they've had on Dodd-Frank, on some of the banking regulations that were put in place to make sure we don't have another 2008, they've had other legislation going after that actively. So I guess you could argue anything that brings in revenue they could go after in order to fund the tax cuts. But right now, they haven't even lived up to their rhetoric about funding tax cuts. They just passed the tax cuts, and at some point we'll deal with them. They just need to take care of their donors. They did, and they didn't put any thought into anything else. So I guess anything could be affected, Jim, but I can't say there's nothing directly going after FDIC to fund them.
Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, hi. I know this is a devastating blow for the unions, but I was wondering if it's possible and legal to make donations to the unions to support them and become like an honorary union member or something like that, if that's a good idea or not.
Bill, there's all kinds of conversations going on right now about what our next steps, including I know there's an effort that's happening to try to have basically people be able to join what would be unions but who aren't necessarily workers for a certain company. So there's going to be a lot of efforts. The good news is don't mourn, organize, right? The saying, I already saw AFL put that out today. We're going to use this as a way to come out of this stronger. It's just good to know that they will do anything on behalf of the billionaires and multimillionaires and the big corporations and special interests to take care of them at the expense of everyone else. And this should just be one more really visual example of what happens if we sit at home in November.
I just went to the AFL-CIO's website, aflcio.org, and right on their homepage, support working people's freedom, pledge your support. And I believe that they have, maybe it's not the AFL, I'm pretty sure it is, though, that they have a quote, union, end quote, that you can join that's not, that doesn't have to do with your workplace, and more basically you're supporting them. I forget the name of it.
Yeah, there is, and they're talking different ways to make that stronger. So I think you're going to have a lot of things come out of this, including, some maybe new areas to organize into. So at the end of the day, I think the billionaires are not going to prosper out of this, but they only care about short-term profits anyway. That's all they've ever focused on. But we just need to take this as one more reminder of what it means if you're not active, what can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And the elections do matter, and the Republicans know this well. It's why they're so heavily, enthusiastically engaged in voter suppression and gerrymandering and all the other stuff. But, if they steal 5 points off an election, we just need to turn up 6 points, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's 45 minutes past the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan and his website, pocan.house.gov. And welcome back. Michael, watching Free Speech TV in Imperial Beach, California. You are on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Hey, Mr. Hartmann. Hey, Representative Pocan. Representative Pocan, I was wondering, Bill Maher had a great thing on the other night. He said that the Republicans have the Koch brothers donating $400 million to campaigns. We have
Bezos, who's worth $141 billion, donating $250,000. We got Bill Gates, worth $94 billion, donating $250,000. I was wondering, Representative Pocan, I know that money is the game. Do you think we have enough Democratic billionaires to pull off this win in 2018 and 2020? Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, a couple of thoughts on this without going too long, but I think we do have other folks that are helping out. The problem is I don't want to get into that escalating war of who's got more money, because let's face it, more billionaires are going to be Republicans. That's why they do these laws and these campaign finance changes to allow all this dark money in, and that's what we should be fighting. So let me just be very clear. But since we can't do that legislatively this year, we do have, I think Michael Bloomberg just said he's going to put in $80 million towards Democratic congressional candidates because he knows that that's the place we can put a goalie in place. So there are plenty of efforts, but I hate to make this equation that whoever's got the most money is going to be the way you win elections, because as we saw yesterday, someone who was outspent 11-1 beat an incumbent. There are certainly other ways we should also be campaigning and organizing around getting out the vote, which is just as important.
Yeah. Let's see here. James in Bellevue, Washington, listening on KBCS. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Congressman, I was wondering if you knew the Civil Air Patrol's function on the southern border and why they're getting the military-industrial complex to put in security down there with that function already in full bloom. Okay, I'll listen out the air. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, James, I don't know. That's a great question. I didn't know the Civil Air Patrol was down there. I know that some states, including my home state of Wisconsin, have sent some National Guard down there. From the articles I've read, they're not patrolling the border like we've been essentially told they would. They're fixing trucks and shuffling paper, and I think that's an abuse of what really talented people who join the National Guard who still have jobs in their local communities are being pulled away from just so that Donald Trump can continue to try to satisfy the racist element of his base that wants to talk about a wall. That's the whole reason we're doing all this terrible stuff at the border anyway. But I will have to look into that. I don't have an answer for you, James.
Congressman, we just have 40 seconds to the break. You were on Fox and Friends this morning talking about the difference between ICE and the Border Patrol.
Border Patrol, yeah.
Are they under separate agencies, or are they both part of the same agency, Homeland Security? I guess they would be.
I believe they're under the same overall agency, but ICE is about a $7 billion agency on its own that, again, essentially goes after the interior portion. So no one is talking about open borders, as you said. That's not what the debate is about, yet they keep making it that. They keep saying it's about criminals coming in, and yet I think there's been 228 MS-13 people out of 300,000. So clearly they just keep putting out these giant lies in order to justify what they're doing, which is keeping their racist base, parts of their base happy. And it's just, for all the wrong reasons, it really is very un-American.
Yeah, amen. We'll be back with more of your questions for Congressman Mark Pocan right after this.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairtom.com is the website, xchairtom.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Our Middays with Mark hour, Congressman Mark Pocan taking and answering your calls. And Anthony in how do you say that, Anthony? I know I screwed it up before. What in California there?
Hi, Tom.
What's the name of your town?
It's Tehachapi, California.
Tehachapi, thank you. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, sir, Congressman. I just have one question. There was a video that not a video, it was an audio tape on YouTube, and it's Kevin McCarthy and it's Paul Ryan. I think this is before the election, and Kevin McCarthy, he says that, I'm a little nervous, but he asked that he believes that Donald Trump was getting paid by the Russians, and there was laughter. And then Paul Ryan, he says, whatever happens in the family stays in the family. Did you hear that, or do you know anything about that?
Yeah, Anthony, I think this was a call the Republicans had pre-election last cycle, like a month before the election, and that was said as they were talking about things. But, for them to completely pretend like there's a blind eye to anything with Donald Trump, especially around the Mueller investigation, it just shows even they know that, these are credible things that we should be looking at, but they won't look at Donald Trump credibly. Therefore, they're going to do everything they can to try to stymie any investigations. That's why they're losing around the country. 44 state legislative races since Donald Trump got elected have flipped from Republican to Democrat. Only 4 the other way. It's 11-to-1 ratio. It's a good ratio. It's because they're so abusive of the law and the process that people aren't just taking it anymore. So I'm familiar with the call. I remember when it happened, but I think, again, this is why they're not winning right now and why hopefully they won't win in November.
Russell in Hickoryville, Iowa. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
No, Hickoryville's Illinois.
Oh, I'm sorry, Illinois.
Okay, Mr. Pocan, did you watch Lawrence O'Donnell last night?
No, I didn't.
Okay, he was talking that we're running a $1.1 trillion deficit already. We blew through $21 trillion in the debt ceiling already. And you guys, the Republicans, are proposing a $500 billion plus permanent tax in September in the new budget because there ain't enough tax cuts for the rich.
Right, it's a new tax cut.
You heard anything about this new tax, $500 and $500 billion tax cut coming that's going to be permanent?
Yeah, so Russell, what they're trying to do, I think they're going to try to use the budget process to do reconciliation again, to get around the 60-vote rule in the Senate, to potentially do more. I think it will be difficult the closer we get to the election to do something like that. But then again, a lot of us said that last year, that we didn't know if they'd get the votes to pass it. But this is the one thing that does unify them. So we need to be very vigilant that they could try to abuse the process once again to do something. I don't think the odds are as great as when it happened last year, but certainly something we're paying very, very close attention to.
Tim in Mesick, Michigan, or is it Messick? It's Mesick, Michigan, isn't it?
Mesick.
Yeah,
Tim,
like you're on
English.
Yeah, you're on the air.
Oh, Congressman, this is the second time I've had the pleasure and honor to speak with you. My name's Tim. I'm a retired machinist. And, it's good to hear fellow union people, and that woman had it right on the button. Listen, you Democrats, okay, what you got to do, you got to take the gloves off. The Republicans blatantly lie, and you're afraid to blatantly tell the truth. I wish the Democrats would stick up for the middle class as ardently as the Republicans stick up for the rich. I mean, you guys get into the political boxing ring wearing little rascal-sized boxing gloves and using a pillow. These guys get in there wearing brass-knuckle trench knives with steel-toed boots and that have...
okay, we got the metaphor, Tim. Let's let the congressman respond.
Yeah, Tim, I think this is a similar refrain we have, that sometimes this is happening, trust me, that we're being very blatant. I mean, I've expressed the reason that they're doing all this at the border, for example, is because Donald Trump wants to appease the racist element in his base that gives him adulation at his events because he is a narcissist who lives on that support like he does anyone else would on air or water. I think that's pretty blunt. The problem is sometimes the corporate media doesn't pick up those voices, so you only hear what they decide to put out there. But I can assure you people are taking the gloves off and fighting hard back. It's just we wish we had better ways to get that out. Some of that is through social media. But rest assured, there are plenty of people, especially in the Progressive Caucus, who've been very outspoken in going after the severe abuses, not only of this administration, but this congressional leadership of Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell.
Congressman, we have just a little less than 60 seconds left before the end of the hour. Not enough time to fairly get anybody on.
Sure.
Your thoughts on the coming week, on where we need to focus our attention in terms of activism and paying attention?
So familiesbelongtogether.org, all the rallies are on the 30th. I think that's an important thing for people to do around the country. There's like 500-600 rallies. Participate in that. And next week, if you members of Congress are home next week, it's a good time to get a hold of them. If you can't get a meeting with them, don't forget, almost all of us go to 4th of July parades, where it's a very public environment, and you can ask your questions and state your opinions there. So please be vocal and participate with groups like Indivisible and others, Move On, that are trying to help us be active participants in democracy.
Yeah, sounds like a great start, and something that we should definitely be doing. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us today.
Of course, thank you, Tom.
Really appreciate it. Congressman Mark Pocan, Middays with Mark. Every week he makes the effort to come out here and hang out with us and share the perspective and take your questions in a relatively unfiltered way. We basically, the only people who don't get on the air are people who are screaming obscenities or obviously drunk. So it's just a marvelous thing that he's doing, and thank him. Thank him online. You could get him over at Twitter at Rep Mark Pocan. We'll be back with more of the program right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by XChair, the XChair office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com. We were a couple $1,000s short of our goal yesterday, like the day before, like on virtually all but 2 days out of this is the third week of our fundraising drive, and I need your help. We've got to hit these goals. We've got to keep this show on the air. We've got to keep this network going. It's just like we've got to do it, and it costs money to send electrons up to satellites and back down to you, regardless of where you're getting the show, even on YouTube. There are expenses involved, and bills have to be paid. And if the bills don't get paid, then the electricity gets turned off. It's really that simple. So 877-378-8669 is our telephone number for Free Speech, or Free Speech TV's telephone number, also on their website, freespeech.org/donate. And we need your help. We need to make this network solid. This is the funding base for Free Speech TV. And, it's how we've done it for years and years. And so far it's worked. So far we've kind of hung on in there, And we're getting some really good results, by the way. I mean, you've got a Democratic socialist who just beat Joe Crowley. Joe Crowley, who's been on this show. Joe Crowley, who was one of the first Democrats to come out for Medicare for all, but was still taking money from big corporations. And, she came in and she said, no, I'm not going to do that. Boom, Joe Crowley's gone. The genuine progressive revolution that you see on this network is actually succeeding at taking over the Democratic Party, one seat at a time. We're doing it. We took over the platform in 2016 and pushed Hillary Clinton way to the left. Not far enough that, unfortunately, that she could win the election. But, well, actually, she did win the election. She got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. And you know that whole story. I don't want to get into that. But the whole, and it wasn't Hillary, it was that whole machine, But which is continuing to move to the left. I mean, look at Tom Perez now. And so I see what we're doing as vital, as important, and as successful. We are changing the dialogue in the Democratic Party. You are changing the dialogue in the Democratic Party. I know this. This is why Mark Pocan comes back on this program every single week. It's why Bernie came back every single week. This show arguably launched Bernie's candidacy. It certainly turned him into a household name all across the country. There are literally millions of people listening to this program over the course of weeks over the course of a week. In fact, according to Talkers Magazine, it's 5.6 million on the radio just. And then, here we are on Free Speech TV. We are changing things. We are having success. Let's not let this thing fail now. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number for Free Speech TV. Please call now. Contributions of any amount are more than welcome, whatever you can give. And if you can commit to a certain amount of money every month, all the better. It's a great way to make a small monthly gift go a long, long way, because it really and truly does add up. The premiums are what we've had all week. The Free Speech TV is a true, did you hear that on Fox News Magnet with the $30 gift, with the $72 gift, the Free Speech TV water bottle. It's hard to find these water bottles that are actually made in the United States and that are chemical free. This one's really cool. It's why it's $72. It's actually a little more expensive premium for Free Speech TV, as opposed to a cheapy one, made in China or something. With a $120 donation, you get a copy of my book, the Thom Hartmann Reader, collection of various writings pulled out of others of my books. And it's a great way to introduce me and my perspective to your friends, neighbors, teachers, students, whatever it may be. And a great gift. That's with a $120 gift or $10 a month for a year. With a $240 gift or $20 a month for a year, you get Howard Zinn's A People's History book, plus the DVD that goes with it, plus Reverend William Barber's book, The Third Reconstruction. That could be $20 a month. With $360 gift or $30 a month for a year, you get all the books and the DVDs. My book, Reverend Barber's book, Howard Zinn's book, the DVD with a $480 gift or $40 a month for a year. You get the Everything Kit, which includes Fox News Magnet, water bottle, autographed book by me, William Barber's book, Howard Zinn's book, and the DVD. And with $1,000, come to Portland, and I'll take you to lunch. And you can sit here in the studio with us and watch the last hour of our program. It's kind of a hoot. Our studio is really a funky little humble thing, and but it's really worth seeing. So 877-378-8669. Please call now. Act now and get this T-shirt.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back to our program. On the line with us, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, the Chief of Staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell, the Distinguished Adjunct Professor of Government and Public Policy at the College of William and Mary. And Colonel Wilkerson, welcome back to the program. It's been a long time since we've talked. It's great to have you with us.
It has been a while.
I caught the other day a comment that you made about don't trust Donald Trump on creating peace with North Korea. And I wanted to dig into that a little bit and also just, generally get your perspective on what's going on in our country right now. You've observed the United States as a military man, as an intelligence officer, as the #2 guy in the State Department, or the Chief of Staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell, and now as a professor of public policy. Where would you prefer to start?
You take your pick.
Okay, well, let's start out with North Korea. Your thoughts on what's going on there?
I would be the last person to disparage anyone of whatever ilk seeking peace on the Korean Peninsula, where I've been involved for 40 years. However, this team disturbs me, first of all, by its bombast and its arrogance at the start, which was not what got Kim Jong-un to come to the negotiating table, as it were. What got him to come was the fact that he studied exactly what his father Kim Jong-il did, and at the end of Kim Il-sung's reign, what his grandfather did. And that is to succor the United States as much as is possible into giving him as much as he can get for as little he will return. And this is a script I've followed with 3 different leaders. It's a script I've followed on the peninsula, off the peninsula. And while we came very close at the end of the Clinton administration, even gave Kim Dae-jung, the South Korean president, the Nobel Peace Prize for bringing peace to the peninsula in his Sunshine Policy. And we came remarkably close, though most don't know it, in the Bush administration when we finally realized that the procedures the Clinton administration had used to gain the agreed framework were pretty sound and adopted them, but too late because the North Koreans had already begun building nuclear weapons. I don't think this administration has the skill to bring this off, and I see Kim Jong-un gaining as much as he possibly can and then cutting everything off. And with John Bolton there beside Trump, it worries me that when he cuts everything off, retreats to China, if you will, we're going to have a worse situation than we had when the bombast was going on, and maybe even more. That worries me.
How might that play out? I mean, do we just revert to the mean? We just go back to, hey, high tensions and we're yelling at each other? Or do you think the failure of this process, particularly when Donald Trump has invested so much of his ego into it, which seems to be the most precious commodity on earth to him, that he might react in a way that would produce possibly even war?
You put your finger right on it. You put your finger on it better than I could. This narcissist, this egomaniac, this reality TV star whom 30-some% of the American people put in the White House, it worries me more than anybody else, except maybe for John Bolton. John Bolton would love to have war on the peninsula. He doesn't care about the casualties that were produced. He just wants the war. And
he went out of his way to avoid the Vietnam War.
Yeah, well, that's the neocons.
Yeah, as did Trump, I guess.
Yeah, they're willing to die to the last person who will go for them to die. This combination of mercurial, narcissistic character in the president and this very hardcore and accomplished guy in terms of getting things done, most of the neocons are, worries me when we get to the end of the road. And as you said eloquently, Trump is presented with a real colossal failure and has to do something about it.
Yeah, that could be very, very problematic. We're seeing an absolute mess in Syria right now. or at least it looks that way. We're seeing Yemen now in a massive humanitarian crisis, 8 million people on the verge of starvation as a consequence of our support of the Saudi policies there, you could argue, or the Saudis would argue, as a result of the Houthi rebellion. I'm seeing, the problem with Iran, pulling out of the Iran deal. Where do you see geopolitically, where do you see the real problem areas, and what are the policies that we're engaging in that might be helpful or that are, frankly, harmful?
Well, let's take that one, the Yemen problem. I've been on the Hill for several weeks with H-Con Res 81 and Senate Special Resolution 54. We got a 54 to 44 vote on that. Scared to be Jesus out of Mitch McConnell. He never thought the vote would be that close. And all that was to get the United States out of an unconstitutional war. There is no congressional authorization per the Constitution and the War Powers Act for U.S. support for Saudi Arabia, UAE, and the others in the coalition in Yemen. And it's a brutal war, as you pointed out. I think the number one problem the United States has right now with regard to national security, and there are so many problems that I could talk forever on it, is the war power and the abuse thereof by the executive branch. We are now counting the no-fly zones in north and south of Iraq from the end of the first Gulf War on. We are 26 years of straight war with no end in sight. The military-industrial complex salivates every day. Raytheon, every time a cruise missile is fired, Raytheon stocks go up, Lockheed stocks go up. We're selling airplanes everywhere. We're selling billions of dollars to the greatest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, Saudi Arabia, under the boy king, Mohammed bin Salman, whose war this is in Yemen, which, incidentally, Tom, the Saudis and the coalition are losing. They're losing badly, and we're supporting them. And it's a brutal war, and it's a horrible humanitarian disaster. This is the biggest problem we have right now. We cannot turn off the executive-initiated war machine. We have a wholly owned subsidiary of the executive branch in the Congress of the United States.
What role do you think that the enormous amount of sucking up to Donald Trump the Saudis did, lining the parade route with TV screens with his picture on them, projecting his picture giant on the sides of buildings, it was just all Donald all the time, we love you, we love you. I think that was his first overseas trip, too. To what extent do you think that is what led to this policy, or was this just something that, a Republican-led Congress and a Republican president would typically go along with?
Well, I don't want to just blame the Republicans, though they're massively guilty. I want to blame the Democrats, too. I talked to Democratic senators and representatives, too, and you wouldn't believe some of the answers I got. They simply do not want to challenge Saudi Arabia. Too much money in U.S. banks, too much investment in the United States, too big an arms buyer, offsetting our having to pay for other things like Chinese production. The fear in Congress, the abject fear of Saudi Arabia, this country from whom 15 of the hijackers came from that perpetrated the tragedy on 9/11, this country keeps our country almost as in obeisance as does Israel. And now that Israel and Saudi Arabia are in a tacit alliance, an alliance of convenience, but nonetheless an alliance, it's even worse.
So what do we do about this?
I've been asking myself that question and asking the few congressmen and senators who care that question for about 6 weeks now. This is a huge problem. We did get close on the vote, but getting the Congress to exercise its constitutional power with regard to the executive's ability to make war anywhere and any time is the challenge right now, immediate challenge, tactical challenge, if you will. There are a lot of other bigger ones, China, climate change, and so forth, but this one, if we don't do something about this, Tom, we are approaching $21 trillion in gross debt. That's reflected in, and much worse reflected in, the fact that we are going to start the year after next or the next, CBO's report shows this clearly, paying interest payments on that debt that equal or surpass the defense budget. Whoa. That same report says by 2028, 2029, which is not very far away, we are going to have no discretionary spending left in the federal budget because of the rise in the interest rates and the rise in our interest payments on that debt. Now, you can't ignore that like we ignore the 2021 trillion gross debt. You got to pay that every year or you default and everything starts collapsing. So we're in a fiscal situation right now, largely because of the inability of the government to run this country well and the wars, that we need to get out of, or we're going to see ourselves chasing China down a rat hole.
And yet, at the end of the Clinton administration, we had a $1.2 trillion budget surplus. At the end of the Carter administration, we had a balanced budget. I don't want to ask.
And this is Republicans. This is Republicans. I will say that people like Chuck Schumer and Steny Hoyer and others are right there with them. Thornberry at the House Armed Services Committee, Royce at the House International Affairs Committee, they're all right there with them. Oh, give them another $1 billion. Give them another $80 billion. Give them another $90 billion. You know, for the rise in the defense budget that we just orchestrated, looks like it's going to pass, you could have sent every child in America for the next 2 times to a 4-year university, and you could have paid for it.
Wow.
That's how much we upped the defense budget. And for what purpose? It's more than we ever had during any annual period during the Cold War when we really did have an enemy. What purpose are we spending this money on?
Yeah, that's remarkable. Colonel, we're talking with Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. We're going to hit a hard break in about a minute and a half, a little less than a minute and a half. Very quickly, I'm curious. You worked in the Bush administration. You knew a lot of these political folks. Are you still in communication with them? And what's the broad opinion of the people that you know? You don't have to name names if you don't want to. Of the Trump administration.
The ones I'm still in touch with are the ones I still have respect for and value their opinions, Republicans and Democrats and independents. And the ones who are still in the government, like the one I talked to last night, for example, in the Pentagon, are frightened. They, one, they don't know how to get out of where they are. 2, if they're professionals like this individual was, they're very frightened of the political appointees. And one wonders if Trump has any knowledge of who he's actually appointing, because most presidents don't down at this level. But the trend in these political appointees is arrogance, narcissism not unlike Trump's, religiosity like Pence's, and utter ignorance about international affairs and security policy in general. And so they're scared. They're frightened. This particular individual. So when Mattis leaves, he's a canary in the coal mine. You've seen the reporting, I'm sure, about possible friction between Trump and Mattis. Well, I've said all along, and when Jim leaves, you've got no check left. And Bolton would probably be the precipitate cause of Jim leaving. So you're just looking at a worsening situation. And if Mattis leaves, there'll be no calm head left there to, kind of check things.
Remarkable. Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, sir, you are a true patriot. Thank you so much for dropping by the program today.
Thanks for having me.
Great talking with you. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a few minutes. It's 18 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back. Stick around. And welcome back. Jared in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jared, thanks for hanging on the phone so long. What's on your mind?
Pretty good. Well, it fits pretty good into the topic you were talking about, Larry Wilkerson, just a moment ago. North Korea, I just recently read this report, and it's pretty damning, to say the least. North Korea making rapid improvements to nuclear reactor despite Trump and Kim agreement.
Right. I tweeted that this morning or last night.
And what do you think about it?
I think that the media will not cover it. The administration will not admit it. It is, a clear slap in the face to us. Whether the North Koreans thought the word would get out or not, who knows? But I'm sure that they have at least some strong inkling of our intelligence capabilities and our satellite photos and whatnot. And they're going ahead with this in a way that is not at all, well concealed. It's just not at all subtle. So I think essentially this is Kim Jong-il's way of saying to Donald Trump, "Ha ha, got you." What do you think, Jared?
I think so too, and I'm really concerned now because I agree 100% with what Larry Wilkerson Colonel Larry Wilkerson said.
Yeah.
Basically, I don't know if I ever told you this, but my grandfather served in the Korean War himself.
Oh, my.
And he came back, and after serving in Japan, too, that's a whole different other topic, but after coming back, he basically, for the rest of his life, was emotionally scarred, basically.
Oh,
I don't want to get into it
my
too
wife's,
much,
Louise's uncle came back from the Korean War, threw his medals away, said, don't ever ask me about that again. And the rest of his life, he died a few years back, and I got to know him fairly well, was just an emotionally devastated man as far as I could tell. He was very, very, very withdrawn and very, kind of quiet and just very troubled, it seemed.
My grandfather was all right for the most part, but sleeping was truly probably a horror show for him because he would wake up in the nights just screaming at the top of his lungs, probably remembering all the people who died around him.
Yeah.
And I'm just really concerned because I just have a feeling that if Trump is boxed into a corner, and they were already talking about doing a bloody nose kind of attack on North Korea, I mean, this could escalate into an attack on, a full-scale nuclear war and a possibility of China also basically igniting World War III in the process.
Yes, and they're getting ready, by the way. China is building aircraft carriers at a rate that, and other warships and warplanes at a rate that is breathtaking. They've surpassed the Russians in their defense spending. And they get a whole hell of a lot more bang for their buck with their defense spending, too, because they're making it, in-house and with cheap labor and whatnot. And they have basically taken most of our advanced technology. Jared, thanks for the call. It's a tough one. It's a real tough one. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. You always contribute to the program. It's 22 and a half minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day right after this.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, a lot in the news today. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I guess is how it's pronounced. And she's a relatively new name to me, and apparently to Congressman Pocan, too, because I mentioned her victory, and he said, yeah, Alexandria, it's easier to remember a first name than a last name that you've never heard before or are not familiar with. This is a 28-year-old member of the Democratic Socialist Party, or the Democratic Socialists of America, a factoid that is very rarely being mentioned in the media because they don't like giving socialism a platform. This woman, in all probability, is going to become the next congressperson from the 14th District of New York, and an extraordinary thing it is. I mean, she's a Bernie-crat, basically. The Democratic Socialists. She supports Medicare for all. She supports the abolition of ICE, which Congressman Mark Pocan just introduced legislation to do. She supports a federal jobs guarantee, and she supports ending private prisons. And that's a big deal. Another candidate backed by the Sanders wing of the party, Ben Jealous. He just won the bid to be the governor of Maryland. He won the Democratic primary and will take on the Republican in November. Ben Jealous, the former head of the NAACP, has been on this program a number of times. Really good guy. We have to get him back on and give him a little salute. Interesting. Juanita Perez Williams in New York's 24th Congressional District. This is in the Democratic primary. She was supported by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC, and she lost to Dana Balter, a more progressive candidate. And just like in Nebraska, you had Eastman upsetting Ashford. This is what we're seeing. The DCCC is basically who handles the money in the Democratic Party for congressional races. And of course, the agency, the group of people who handle the money are the ones who are going to be looking at where is the money and oh, hey, there's a corporation over here that wants to help us out. There's a Wall Street guy over here who wants to help us out. We'll take that. And so they tend to put forward these candidates who are not the most progressive candidates because their first litmus test, their first filter is, can they raise a lot of money? And what we're finding is, for example, Alexandria, get back to her name here, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was outspent 18-1 by Joe Crowley and won, right? Dana Balter was outspent by Juanita Perez Williams, and won. Representative Jared Polis, I don't know if he was outspent, but he won the Democratic gubernatorial nomination in Colorado. A member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Yesterday was a great day for the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Not a small deal at all. This is a big deal.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls right after this. We were a couple $1,000s short of our goal yesterday, like the day before, like on virtually all but 2 days out of this is the third week of our fundraising drive, and I need your help. We've got to hit these goals. We've got to keep this show on the air. We've got to keep this network going. It's just like we've got to do it, and it costs money to send electrons up to satellites. And back down to you, regardless of where you're getting the show, even on YouTube, there are expenses involved, and bills have to be paid. And if the bills don't get paid, then the electricity gets turned off. It's really that simple. So 877-378-8669 is our telephone number for Free Speech, or is Free Speech TV's telephone number. Also on their website, freespeech.org/donate. And we need your help. We need to make this network solid. This is the funding base for Free Speech TV. And, it's how we've done it for years and years. And so far it's worked. So far we've kind of hung on in there, And we're getting some really good results, by the way. You've got a Democratic socialist who just beat Joe Crowley. Joe Crowley, who's been on this show. Joe Crowley, who was one of the first Democrats to come out for Medicare for All, but was still taking money from big corporations. And, she came in and she said, no, I'm not going to do that. Boom, Joe Crowley's gone. The genuine progressive revolution that you see on this network is actually succeeding at taking over the Democratic Party, one seat at a time. We're doing it. We took over the platform in 2016 and pushed Hillary Clinton way to the left. Not far enough that, unfortunately, that she could win the election. But, well, actually, she did win the election. She got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. And you know that whole story. I don't want to get into that. But the whole, and it wasn't Hillary. It was that whole machine, But which is continuing to move to the left. I mean, look at Tom Perez now. And so I see what we're doing as vital, as important, and as successful. We are changing the dialogue in the Democratic Party. You are changing the dialogue in the Democratic Party. I know this. This is why Mark Pocan comes back on this program every single week. It's why Bernie came back every single week. This show arguably launched Bernie's candidacy. It certainly turned him into a household name all across the country. There are literally millions of people listening to this program over the course of weeks over the course of a week. In fact, according to Talkers Magazine, it's 5.6 million on the radio just. And then, here we are on Free Speech TV. We are changing things. We are having success. Let's not let this thing fail now. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number for Free Speech TV. Please call now. Contributions of any amount are more than welcome, whatever you can give. And if you can commit to a certain amount of money every month, all the better. It's a great way to make a small monthly gift go a long, long way, because it really and truly does add up. The premiums are what we've had all week. The Free Speech TV is a true, did you hear that on Fox News Magnet with the $30 gift, with the $72 gift, the Free Speech TV water bottle. It's hard to find these water bottles that are actually made in the United States and that are chemical free. This one's really cool. It's why it's $72. It's actually a little more expensive premium for Free Speech TV, as opposed to a cheapy one, made in China or something. With a $120 donation, you get a copy of my book, the Thom Hartmann Reader, collection of various writings pulled out of others of my books. And it's a great way to introduce me and my perspective to your friends, neighbors, teachers, students, whatever it may be. And a great gift. That's with a $120 gift or $10 a month for a year. With a $240 gift or $20 a month for a year, you get Howard Zinn's A People's History book, plus the DVD that goes with it, plus Reverend William Barber's book, The Third Reconstruction. That could be $20 a month. With $360 gift or $30 a month for a year, you get all the books and the DVDs. My book, Reverend Barber's book, Howard Zinn's book, the DVD with a $480 gift or $40 a month for a year. You get the Everything Kit, which includes Fox News Magnet, water bottle, autographed book by me, William Barber's book, Howard Zinn's book, and the DVD. And with $1,000, come to Portland, and I'll take you to lunch. And you can sit here in the studio with us and watch the last hour of our program. It's kind of a hoot. Our studio is really a funky little humble thing, and but it's really worth seeing. So 877-378-8669. Please call now. Act now and get this T-shirt. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. On the line with us is Professor Richard Wolff, the economist, co-founder of Democracy at Work, author most recently of Capitalism's Crisis Deepens, Essays on the Global Economic Meltdown. His website, democracyatwork.info, and rdwolf with 2fs.com. You can tweet him at Prof. Wolf with 2 Fs. And Professor Wolff, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
As we're seeing all these progressive victories, genuine progressive victories like we saw yesterday in New York State and frankly all around the country, I'm curious your thoughts on what the kind of the institutional holder at the moment of with some actual modicum of power, the institutional holder of the progressive movement, the Democratic Party. I think virtually all the members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, for example, are members of the Democratic Party. None of them are Republicans, obviously. What should be the policy agenda of this new progressive wave that seems to be, even a larger sweep than the Democratic Party itself?
Well, you would hope, even though I'm afraid that what I'm about to say is not the case, but you would hope that they could see what seems to me to be the writing on the wall, that the country is more and more splitting into halves, alternative or hostile to one another, and an increasingly acrimonious kind of state of our communications, and that the mass of people who were disaffected by the last 30 years of our economic system are basically choosing between a right-wing expression, if you like, of that perspective, which supports Trump, and whatever else you want to call it, Bernie Sanders movement or the progressive or more progressive wing. That seems to me to be literally proceeding. I don't find that surprising, since the growing inequality of the United States that I think is the root cause of why Trump was elected has only gotten worse since his election. Therefore, the driver, if you like, of what's happening continues. And my fear, though, is, and why I'm a little negative in this moment, is that I don't see the signs that the established Democratic Party has any understanding or any intention of accommodating what's happening. It seems to be doubling down in the hope that Mr. Trump will implode on himself and everybody will then turn to them. And my guess is they're going to be badly disappointed in that expectation.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing, I mean, you're even seeing a challenge to the governor of New York State, who is about as burrowed into the Democratic establishment as you can get. Whether Cynthia Nixon will succeed in bumping him out or not, you live in New York State. You probably have a better analysis of that than I do. But
well, I can tell you an interesting thing, which is Mr. Cuomo continuously acted until very recently as though he were the elephant and Cynthia Nixon was a mosquito, and he wasn't going to be irritated even in the slightest degree by this very dismissive. All of that changed, I think, about a month and a half ago, and now Mr. Cuomo is suddenly sprouting progressive sorts of wings, is out there denouncing Trump with a gusto that he didn't manage to generate in the earlier time. He's running a little bit nervous. I mean, he does have the machine. The same people who once said very loudly that there's a special place in that hot place down below for any woman who votes, who doesn't vote for a woman candidate, have found their way to ignore their own advice when it comes to Cynthia Nixon and Andrew Cuomo. One could say a lot about those things, but the machine wants him. He wants the machine, and that's their commitment. They're going to get the office because they live in a world where the last 50 years of a polite handing over of power from the Democrats to the Republicans and vice versa was the only thing that politics meant, and they want that to continue, and therefore they become blind to both the underlying forces and the political expression of those forces that show up in Trump, in Bernie, and now in these results.
Yeah. I'm seeing increasingly in financial blogs and newsletters and whatnot concern about the flattening of the yield curve, the difference between what we pay for long-term, say 10-year treasuries, and what we pay for short-term treasuries, 6-month treasuries or 1-year treasuries. And of course, historically, you pay, or the Treasury Department would pay us if we bought these treasury bills, pay more for the long-term ones than the short-term ones, because when you buy a long-term one, you're tying your money up for 10 years. And so, if the economy gets really, really great and interest rates go up, you're in trouble, so you get this premium. And as that premium collapses for a bunch of different reasons, and maybe you could articulate some of those, with one single exception, ever since the end of World War II, every time the yield curve has inverted, that is, the 10-year treasuries have gotten cheaper than short treasuries, it has heralded a major recession. It happened before 2000. It happened in 2007. It happened in '87 in the big crash on Reagan. I mean, over and over again. What are your thoughts on this? What is causing this, and to what extent is this an indication of the limits of the Fed's ability to keep the baling wire and bubble gum in place to hold this economy together?
Well, I think the key answer is to pick up from the very last thing you said. The larger historical situation is, and this I think is at the root of much of what goes on in the United States politically these days. We are in a period when the American dominance of the global economy, which is about 100 years old, it really came into its own after World War I, is fading. And you can dance and you can jump up and down and you can tell yourself every story you want, but that's the underlying reality. The Europeans have recovered from 2 world wars. The Chinese are the star story of the last 40 years. The rest of the world is arriving, if you like, into a modern economic role to play. And the United States, whether it's the Federal Reserve or the President or the Congress, has to face, even though they do everything on earth to avoid it, that they are no longer in a position to control the situation the way they once were. And nothing illustrates it more than what we call hot money in the global finance business. That is, flows of money that move between long and short-term investments, but also move from one currency to another, from one society to another. And that money is now enormous, and it is very quick to adjust to anything it sees, either as an opportunity or as a threat. And the inversion of the yield curve, this phenomena where the normal distinctions between long and short-term debt are eviscerated, that's a sign of a massive amount of anxiety, of volatility, of uncertainty. Nobody quite knows whether Mr. Trump is actually going to be able and willing to push through a genuine trade war. And even if you think you know the answer to that question, you then have to ask the next one. What will be the retaliations around the world? How will that affect world trade? And anything that affects world trade on that scale will affect the flows of money and all the anxieties of the people in charge of it. And that's really what you're seeing. You're seeing, it's a little bit like recognizing that all the anomalous weather we see around us is a sign of global warming. Well, all the anomalous economic signs are a sign of very profound changes that are going to shape the world in the century to come. But we live in a country which, because of its peculiar politics, seems unable or unwilling to even talk about these things in a systematic way. So, for example, economists like me, I scour the financial press to see what the hedge fund guys are thinking and doing. And this morning's headline was a wonderful example. 2 or 3 of the leading hedge fund managers in this country, who have long-standing, superb reputations, are out this morning, a Bloomberg report, saying that they think the American economy is in a terrible situation with a crisis literally around the corner. That doesn't mean that that's true, and it doesn't mean that they have crystal balls, but it's a sign that everybody who follows this stuff closely is aware of the enormous historical shifts going on, whereas we live in a world of media and academia and politicians who seem to want to lull us into a notion that none of this is something anyone needs to worry about.
Yeah, and this is not a healthy thing.
No,
we have about
very dangerous.
We have about 30 seconds, sir, until we're going to hit a hard break here. Your thoughts on what people should be paying attention to in the next week?
I think they ought to pay a great deal of attention to the response of the Chinese government and of the Europeans to what Mr. Trump is seeming to be determined to do. They will retaliate in all likelihood, and how hard they retaliate will mean how many Americans suffer from what Mr. Trump is doing. That could destroy the base of his support, or it could make it go even more extreme as they try to cope with something they weren't prepared to go through.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting,
very important stuff.
Yeah, and a wild ride. Professor Richard Wolff, it's always great talking with you. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Wolff.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to do it. Take care.
Great speaking with you. We'll be back. We're going to check in with Talk Media News in just a minute and find out what the latest news in the world is, what's going on in the world today. And we'll be back with more right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with Talk Media News in just a few minutes. At the top of the hour, we're going to have the sole survivor of the Holocaust from Cologne, Germany with us. Stick around. And welcome back. Corky in Rochester, New York, watching us on Free Speech TV on Direct
Hello,
TV.
Tom.
Hey, Corky, what's up?
Yeah, I wanted to talk to Dr. Richard Wolf about the latest thing with Trump and cashing in our insurance policy on inflation. When he put the $1 trillion liquidity into the economy with the tax reductions.
Yeah, it was $1.5 trillion actually this year.
Yeah, that's what we use to bail us out of recessions or oncoming recessions.
Yeah, Dr. Wolf has said in the past, this is a disaster. It has, we have low interest rates right now, which means that the Fed can't goose the economy by lowering interest rates further, freeing up money, making it easier for people to borrow and thus spend and thus stimulate the economy. And we can't do tax cuts right now because, this last tax cut was so massive, and tax cuts are a stimulus to the economy. And this is, we're at the end of this economic cycle, and the Republicans decided to just juice an economy that was already, going along fairly well, at least by some measures. And in the midst of all this, the people who are left behind, the people who are being ignored are the working class, the people who haven't seen a pay raise since Ronald Reagan came into office and started destroying unions.
Yeah.
Yesterday's Supreme Court decision is actually going to hurt the economy even worse because you're going to see, probably a few million people who are public employees now drop out of their unions. And over time, over the course of, 10, 15 years, you're going to see the pay of public employees go down as well.
Yeah, well,
which further depresses demand.
You have nothing to fall back on now. You use the last of your credit card.
That's right. Well, or the federal government has, yeah, because the credit card that the federal government had was essentially the ability to manipulate interest rates and the ability to goose the economy with cheap money, free money, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm worried about. Our next recession is going to be the most serious we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very legitimate concern. Corky, thanks for the call. Michael in Snohomish, Washington. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hi, I've been listening, and I think the Republicans have a strategy. It's to tear down the middle class so they can build up a servant class.
Oh, they absolutely do. In his book, The Conservative Mind, in 1951, Russell Kirk predicted that if the middle class ever got wealthy enough and large enough, and it was moving in that direction in 1951, then you would see chaos in the streets, was what he predicted. And in the 1960s and 70s, when people were protesting the war and demanding civil rights and things like that, the Republicans said, "Okay, Russell Kirk was right. Here it is. We've got to kill off this middle class." And that was Ronald Reagan's main job: destroy the unions and start scaling back the middle class so that people are economically frightened and not willing to go out in the streets.
It's like on Downton Abbey. Donald Trump would take away Daisy's typewriter, make her stay a scullery cook.
Yeah, there you go.
Scullery maid.
Yeah, I wrote a book about this called Screwed, the Undeclared War on the Middle Class back 8 years ago. And, laid out, this is what's coming. This is the Republican strategy. And every step has been followed very, very well. The book is still very current. And it gets into, why they're doing it, where the ideology came from, who the people are, the whole thing. Michael, thanks for the call, and thanks for listening to KBCS. I appreciate it. We're going to check in with Talk Media News. Ellen Ratner will be with us in just a moment. Stick around. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Welcome back. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. And on the line with us, the head of Talk Media News herself, Ellen Ratner. Ellen, we've already discussed at some length some of the progressive victories, although, feel free to repeat them. And also the... well, I guess that's pretty much it. We had Congressman Pocan on. And the Supreme Court's decision on the, destroying labor unions.
The Supreme Court decision, it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
But, you always predict things, Tom. That's why I love you. But, I have to tell you, when they got rid of Merrick Garland as Obama's person, because the Senate was controlled by Republicans, I mean, look what has happened. It's 5-4 decisions this week.
Yeah. One was ending, basically making it more difficult to use the Sherman Antitrust Act, the antitrust laws.
Right.
One was sanctioning more discrimination, and one, of course, was union busting.
And today's was union busting. It's hard to believe. Now, supposedly it only is for public unions, but you know as well as I know that it's going to work out to the other unions as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah, the few states left that are not right to work for less states already. There'll be another case before the Supreme Court probably in the next term.
And you know how they're going to vote, unfortunately.
Yep.
Okay. A couple other interesting things. One is despite Donald Trump's great relationship with Kim Jong-un, it looks like he's continued to upgrade their nuclear reactor. There has satellite imagery showing how they've upgraded it. So they're still working on their nukes.
Right, and do you think that this is a giant middle finger to Donald Trump, or do you think they thought they could get away with it and nobody would notice?
I think they thought they could get away with it and nobody would notice.
Yeah, that makes the most sense, yeah.
Okay, now yesterday's primaries, I just want to take another look at them. Mm-hmm. Number one is that in New York, Michael Grimm had done some time in prison for tax dodging, and he ran against the guy that won his seat when he went to prison.
Right, this is the guy who also threatened to beat up an NBC reporter.
Right. And throw him off the balcony.
Mm-hmm. He's the one who famously said, I'm going to break you like a boy, whatever the hell that means.
But he lost.
Yeah.
Okay. The other very interesting race, and I think progressives need to pay attention to this, is Representative Joe Crowley. Now, he was fourth in line in the Democrats, was thought even to maybe be Speaker of the House if the Democrats won back Congress, and he got beaten by a 28-year-old woman.
Who is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America.
That's right, and who supported Bernie Trump. She was on Bernie Sanders,
yeah.
Bernie Sanders committee.
Yeah.
Now, what's so fascinating about that is there was a debate between her and him, and he didn't show up. He sent somebody else to it. I mean, what planet was he on?
Yeah, this is like Eric Cantor.
They get so arrogant.
Yeah, it was like Eric Cantor. You almost wonder if he wanted to lose, or if he was just, like you said, arrogant. If he just believed, hey, I got this. Why should I bother with this pesky progressive who's trying to come after me? Although he's a member, he himself, he was one of the Democrats to come out, one of the first Democrats to come out in favor of Medicare for all.
No, I understand that, and but I've seen him in action, and the guy is arrogant, and you just don't. When you got a 28-year-old, you don't say, "Oh, I'm going to win anyway, so I'm not even going to bother to go to the debate."
Yeah, big mistake.
Big mistake. Okay, now one very interesting race, I think, is the race in Colorado for governor. Now, the guy is term limited, Hickenlooper. He's considered a moderate Democrat, but Polis, depending on how you pronounce his name, is a member of Congress. He's an openly gay member of Congress, and if by any chance he does win, he won the nomination yesterday, if by any chance he wins for governor, he would be the first openly gay governor in the United States of America.
And I will applaud. It would be a great thing.
He's an amazing. I know the guy. I mean, he's really good at what he does, and he's pretty. He's not as progressive as I would like it, but he's pretty progressive.
Yeah, he's a member of the Progressive Caucus. He's also, I think, one of the wealthiest members of Congress, isn't he?
He is. He made a lot of money, I think, in IT.
Yeah.
That's how
guy.
he made his money.
Yeah.
Right. By the way, speaking of money, it looks like none other than the former mayor of New York, who's now become a Democrat and is giving $80 million to the Democratic Party, Bloomberg, might be running for president.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think he's always wanted to run for president. He flirted, you'll recall, in one of the past presidential cycles with basically being a Ross Perot kind of candidate, and ultimately discarded that. His problem has been a lack of party affiliation, but $80 million to the basically to the, I don't know if he's routing it through the DCCC or how he's going to do it, but the Democratic Party has to sit up, take notice, and say, okay, we need to take this guy seriously as one of ours.
Right, absolutely. Now, also, it's very interesting. Earth Justice sued on behalf of a couple of other environmental groups, the Interior Department, because of Freedom of Information Act requests, a FOIA request.
So they're going after Ryan Zinke?
They're going after Ryan Zinke. They say that he has asked various top-level people to review the FOIA requests. They're usually just done by an office and nobody even thinks twice about it, but he wants it personally reviewed.
Which slows it down.
Right. And, our little news operation has put in a couple FOIA requests for people's independent financials, and they say they can't find the people. Give me a break. They're coming to work every day.
Interesting.
I mean, so we know what's happening with FOIA requests everywhere, and I wouldn't be surprised if that doesn't start from the top.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it started when Trump said, no, I'm not going to show my taxes.
Right.
It's like,
exactly.
Transparency. Transparency's for suckers. Are you kidding? Transparency's for governments that call themselves small d democratic. It's for republics. It's not for autocrats. It's not for kings, boy kings like Donald Trump. Forgive my rant, Ellen. Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News.
No, I love your rant.
Thank you, Ellen. Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News, brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen's new book, Loving What You Do. Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. We'll be back. We are going to talk with Dr. Henry Oster. He is the sole survivor of the Holocaust from Cologne, Germany, and he's got a new book out. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by XChair, the XChair chair, office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com. We were a couple $1,000s short of our goal yesterday, like the day before, like on virtually all but 2 days out of this is the third week of our fundraising drive, and I need your help. We've got to hit these goals. We've got to keep this show on the air. We've got to keep this network going. It's just like we've got to do it. And it costs money to send electrons up to satellites and back down to you, regardless of where you're getting the show, even on YouTube, there are expenses involved, and bills have to be paid. And if the bills don't get paid, then the electricity gets turned off. I mean, it's really that simple. So 877-378-8669 is our telephone number for Free Speech, or is Free Speech TV's telephone number. Also on their website, freespeech.org/donate. And we need your help. We need to make this network solid. This is the funding base for Free Speech TV. And, it's how we've done it for years and years. And so far it's worked. So far we've kind of hung on in there, And we're getting some really good results, by the way. I mean, you've got a Democratic socialist who just beat Joe Crowley. Joe Crowley, who's been on this show. Joe Crowley, who was one of the first Democrats to come out for Medicare for all, but was still taking money from big corporations. And, she came in and she said, no, I'm not going to do that. Boom, Joe Crowley's gone. The genuine progressive revolution that you see on this network is actually succeeding at taking over the Democratic Party, one seat at a time. We're doing it. We took over the platform in 2016 and pushed Hillary Clinton way to the left. Not far enough that, unfortunately, that she could win the election. But, well, actually, she did win the election. She got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. And you know that whole story. I don't want to get into that. But the whole, and it wasn't Hillary, it was that whole machine, But which is continuing to move to the left. I mean, look at Tom Perez now. And so I see what we're doing as vital, as important, and as successful. We are changing the dialogue in the Democratic Party. You are changing the dialogue in the Democratic Party. I know this. This is why Mark Pocan comes back on this program every single week. It's why Bernie came back every single week. This show arguably launched Bernie's candidacy. It certainly turned him into a household name all across the country. There are literally millions of people listening to this program over the course of weeks it's over the course of a week. In fact, according to Talkers Magazine, it's 5.6 million on the radio just. And then, here we are on Free Speech TV. We are changing things. We are having success. Let's not let this thing fail now. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number for Free Speech TV. Please call now. Contributions of any amount are more than welcome, whatever you can give. And if you can commit to a certain amount of money every month, all the better. It's a great way to make a small monthly gift go a long, long way, because it really and truly does add up. The premiums are what we've had all week. The Free Speech TV is a true, did you hear that on Fox News Magnet with the $30 gift, with the $72 gift, the Free Speech TV water bottle. It's hard to find these water bottles that are actually made in the United States and that are chemical free. This one's really cool. It's why it's $72. It's actually a little more expensive premium for Free Speech TV, as opposed to a cheapy one, made in China or something. With a $120 donation, you get a copy of my book, the Thom Hartmann Reader, collection of various writings pulled out of others of my books. And it's a great way to introduce me and my perspective to your friends, neighbors, teachers, students, whatever it may be. And a great gift. That's with a $120 gift or $10 a month for a year. With a $240 gift or $20 a month for a year, you get Howard Zinn's A People's History book, plus the DVD that goes with it, plus Reverend William Barber's book, The Third Reconstruction. That could be $20 a month. With $360 gift or $30 a month for a year, you get all the books and the DVDs. My book, Reverend Barber's book, Howard Zinn's book, the DVD with a $480 gift or $40 a month for a year. You get the Everything Kit, which includes Fox News Magnet, water bottle, autographed book by me, William Barber's book, Howard Zinn's book, and the DVD. And with $1,000, come to Portland, and I'll take you to lunch. And you can sit here in the studio with us and watch the last hour of our program. It's kind of a hoot. Our studio is really a funky little humble thing, and but it's really worth seeing. So 877-378-8669. Please call now. Act now and get this T-shirt.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is Dr. Henry Oster. Am I saying that right? Is it Oster or Oster?
Oh, any way you want, but Oster would be better.
Oster. Okay, thank you. He is the sole survivor of the Holocaust from Cologne, Germany, Germany. He has a new book out. It's called The Kindness of the Hangman. At the age of 89 now, do I have that right, sir?
You have that right, absolutely.
This is remarkable. You were 5 years old when the Nazis came to power in Germany, and you were 16 when Hitler was defeated. From the notes I have and from reading through your book, that was in 1933 when the Nazis came to power. You escaped a firing squad in Auschwitz. You came within hours of starving to death before you were liberated by General Patton's Third Army. What lessons, well, first of all, welcome to our program. I'm so glad to have you with us, sir.
It's an honor to be on your program, Tom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a remarkable book. The subtitle, in fact, The Kindness of the Hangman is the title. The subtitle is Even in Hell There Is Hope. A true young German boy's true story of tragedy and triumph from the depths of despair in Auschwitz and Buchenwald to an extraordinary life in America. Henry, or Mr. Oster, you...
No, Henry.
Okay, Henry, you have seen the worst of humanity, the absolute worst of humanity. And there are comparisons being made today by some, including myself from time to time, between the loss of democratic institutions in the United States and the rise of fascism in Germany and Italy and Spain, other countries around the world. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, I believe that currently, the last, shall we say 2 years, we have seen replica of the events that I had witnessed, endured, and fortunately survived. I am so Americanized that I'm devastated with the events that we are viewing and experiencing right now. Very disappointing and very discouraging to see that. I actually see the duplication of German propaganda maneuvers, techniques, and obviously the unfortunate not to see the condemnation of these things. So to live in America and see something I'd seen before, to say the least, is disturbing, especially since it seems to have a considerable support. The Germans, of course, went the whole history as an agreement to Hitler's plans and the Nazi philosophy, if you can call it. Here we see examples of it, and yet we find ourselves more or less powerless to change. So it is nothing brand new. It is something in both the propaganda, the promises. Hitler said Germany will rise again. Here we see America great again. These are by words different, but the intent seems to be pretty much other fascistic. A fascism replication of the past.
I read Milton Mayer's book. He was an American journalist who, in the very late 40s, I believe, or maybe even the early 50s, went over to Germany, spent a year there, interviewed at length 10 Germans who were not part of the Nazi movement and were not the victims of the Nazi movement. They just had jobs and they worked all through everything, right? College professor, a bricklayer, a baker, just average people.
Right.
And said, what was going on? And almost to a man, what they said was, number one, there were so many things happening so fast. Literally every day, the news cycle was being inundated with oh, the Nazis just did this, Hitler just did that, Hitler says this, everybody should do that, and some actual genuine positive reforms. We're going to build the Autobahn. Other things, oh, we regret that we're going to have to, do this to the trade unionists. Number one. Number two, the big lie strategy these people reported, these enormous lies, one of the most horrific, obviously, about the Jews, were told and repeated over and over and over again to the point that they became conventional wisdom. And number three, that the administration of the German government at the time had become so incestuous, essentially, so inward looking, that either you were with the cult or you were against the cult, and there was no middle ground. Is that an accurate depiction of what you experienced growing up in Germany, from the time when Hitler came to power in 1933 until he was kicked out 12 years later?
No, that's absolutely correct. Well, first of all, there were only in 1933 600,000 Jews in all of Germany in a population of 60 million. And with the indoctrination from childhood on, at least since 1933, that with Hitler used, that they were superior, that they were above everybody else, and everybody else designated as subhuman were exactly subhuman, they ate it up. They were actually convinced of that.
The Germans thought that they were the master race.
Not every German was a Nazi. There were only 8 million party members, but the doctrines that the Nazi had was readily accepted by the whole population and enthusiastically supported. Now, the idea of eliminating Jews became a minor thing. After all, we're only 1% of the population. But one reason that Germans went for it, even those that were not entirely supportive of Hitler, was the threat of concentration camps. After the war, everybody said, we had no idea. Of course they did. You had Gestapo, which would be the equivalent to FBI in our country, in every certain area of each city, and they walked around in their leather coats, intimidating the population that if you don't adhere to what the Nazis and our party is doing, Daddy will probably disappear. At least 3 days confinement in the Gestapo headquarters, or if it was something more contrived or imaginary violation, they would end up in a concentration camp. Because if you ask neighbors for any assistance, they always told you, well, we don't want to end up in the concentration camp. And after the war, they all said, well, we didn't know anything about it. These were absolutely, with no doubt about it, untruths and basic denials, if not lies. And so Germany went at it. They loved uniforms and flags. One of the things why somebody we know here wants to have a parade. I never use our president's name, by the way. I think people know that. He wants to have a parade, which the Germans were famous for. He didn't object to the parade of neo-Nazis in Charlottesville. The thing is, there are a permissive attitude of our government that will encourage people like the Nazis to become encouraged here to have certainly un-American ideas, un-American convictions, and actually un-American deeds that are as uncommon for us. Now, admittedly, and unfortunately, in World War II, we had America First, also restricting immigration and not letting refugees from Europe come into this country. So Mr. President probably thinks he can repeat it this time, especially for whatever reason he proposes. It appeals to a segment of our population and they should also and definitely be ashamed of it.
We're talking to Henry Oster, the author of The Kindness of the Hangman at 89 years old, the last surviving citizen of Cologne, Germany, who survived the Holocaust. Henry, how did you end up in Auschwitz and Buchenwald?
Well, first of all, that was kind of automatic. There were 2,011 Jews from the city of Cologne. And by the way, only 23 survived the war. All were killed. And it was in 2011 that I was notified and discovered to be the last surviving of these 2011. People were taken forcefully, put on trains, and sent, in this case, my family, to a ghetto. A ghetto, the Warsaw Ghetto, and ours was a large ghetto, were parts of the city, dilapidated, run down, where they crammed as many Jews as possible, like a holding pattern, like some place that they will hold them and gradually send them out by nightly daylight raids, put them on trucks, and simply send them to Auschwitz. There were 6 various facilities around the major cities of Poland, primarily Poland, because when they started World War II, the Germans inherited 3 million Polish Jews. And how are you going to get rid of them? Only by German efficiency, I guess. They built facilities were called extermination camps. These were camps where you arrived and you died. There were no overnight facilities to have anybody stay for one night even. So when they actually took the concentration camp idea and converted to extermination camp, and Germany had over 2,000 concentration camps, but there were these 6 facilities in Poland just for killing, they gradually took people from the ghettos and from sometimes directly from Germany or prisoners of war and send them to these camps. In this particular case, my dad had already died of starvation in the ghetto. My mom and I were caught, put on train, and sent to Auschwitz. Now, Auschwitz, just for a little accuracy, is a huge complex. All the German factories, the machinery, the chemicals, everything was produced there, and Auschwitz was considered to be the labor to supply these people for forced labor. The second and most important and the most deadly part of Auschwitz was Birkenau, 1.5 miles away. That extermination facility of Auschwitz.
Right.
We were selected.
Henry, if I may, I'm sorry, we're hitting a hard break here. I can't control it. Can you stick around with us for this half hour? For another 15 minutes?
As long as you need me.
Wonderful. We're talking with Henry Oster, his new book, The Kindness of the Hangman. At 89 years old, Henry Oster is the last surviving member of the last survivor, of the Holocaust from Cologne, Germany. We'll be back with Henry Oster in just a minute.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Henry Oster escaped a firing squad in Auschwitz and came within hours of starving to death before liberation by Patton's Third Army. We'll be back with him. Henry, we're back, and you were telling the story of Auschwitz. Forgive the interruption.
Okay. So when you arrived by all the railroad facilities from all over Europe, surprisingly could reach Birkenau, which was only 1.5 miles away from the concentration camp of Auschwitz, where the forced labor was being kept, and everybody had to go to work from there. But when you arrived in Birkenau, the Nazis made a selection, who will live and who will die. You had to look or be 15 years or older to be even considered to remain alive. All other children, every other child was immediately killed in the various gas chambers and following, obviously, in the crematorium. I have never known why I was so lucky to be at the age of 16 to be selected to live. We were put into the Birkenau facility. They asked never to have any volunteers. Somehow, miraculously and idiotically, one day I did volunteer, and turned out to be 131 boys were taken to be working in the next few weeks and months in stables to support the German army. They needed horses to invade Russia. From then, in January, we were forced on a death march because we did not know we were being taken away just 10 days before the Auschwitz and all the facilities surrounding it was going to be liberated by the approaching Russian army from the east. They put us on trains. We were attacked by Allied fighter planes because these were open livestock wagons, and they had the order that all retreating German military to defend Germany for the next in the last few months should not arrive. They could not recognize us with striped uniforms from any other military branch, but I survived it. And we ended up in Buchenwald. I could not believe I would be back in my godforsaken country of birth, which Buchenwald was in Germany. Auschwitz and Birkenau, of course, were all in Poland, along with the other 5 extermination centers. There I was kept and not fed, as it was not customary to get more than a piece of bread, and not even every day. 1,500 boys had been gathered in that camp from all over Europe to be put into one huge abandoned stable. The stable was infected with typhus, and 926 survived on the day that Patton liberated the camp, April 11th. And that is how I survived. The terrible statistics that only 1/10, and I repeat, 1/10 of 1% of all juveniles arriving in camps were kept alive, because Hitler and the Nazis had the doctrine, if you want to call it that we must eradicate the Jewish children first. If they survive, they would procreate, and what have we accomplished in the future if we don't kill them now?
Remarkable.
That's why children had little chance of survival in any of the selections.
Sir, we've got about a 10-second pause here, and we'll be right back. It's 22 minutes past the hour. We're talking to Henry Oster. We'll be right back with him in just a moment. Welcome back. Henry Oster is with us. He is the last survivor of the Holocaust from Cologne, Germany. He was 5 years old when Hitler came to power in 1933. He was 16 years old when Hitler was defeated. He's 89 years old now. He escaped the firing squad in Auschwitz. He was nearly starved to death. Patton liberated him. Henry, you were talking very eloquently, and by the way, we only have about 3 minutes left here. You were talking very eloquently about the camps and that you were taken to, and how many of them were, not specifically death camps. As Donald Trump is building these detention facilities, 30,000, 40,000 person detention facilities on military bases around the United States, is it an exaggeration? Is it hysteria to say that there's some parallel?
It's a little bit more than a parallel, because while the intention is obviously not to kill children, but the pain, the agony, and the damage in memories to be ripped away from your parents, kept literally in cage-like structures, fences surrounding that couldn't even climb over it, and being treated in a number of ways, not all of them being favorable. It does damage your psyche. It does damage your memory, because nobody wants to be thrown away. the most painful memory of my experience was when I did arrive in Birkenau. My mother was torn away and died the same day that she arrived. And I can sympathize and feel and certainly identify myself with children that have to go through the same thing right now. Not that the parents will be killed, but absence is absence.
Yeah.
If they're not there, you're going to be painfully reminded that you lost your parent, and you have no idea when and if they will be reunited. It's a painful experience, whether it's in war and peace, but certainly has no business in a country like ours.
Yeah.
Shame. And that's why, if I may, I will, if you see the picture, what I think is the most dramatic, and I think should be a prize-winning cover of Time magazine. This is the example of pain at its utmost. This is the agony of a child looking up at the worst image. It will be a memory, a reminder for the rest of a little boy's or little girl's life. It cannot be eradicated.
We have a little less than a minute. You came to the United States with no English, no money, no education. What are your thoughts on the way that this administration is treating immigrants and refugees?
Well, first of all, number one, the discouraging aspect of having immigrants come here to begin with is shameful. Europe and European countries put us to shame. We're a laughing stock in the international relations or recognition. We're no longer the leader of the world. We're just a come along and go along, and poorly at that. The fact that we are a country based on immigrants, started by immigrants, created by immigrants and supported. We used to have the welcome mat out, and I am afraid that the flame of liberty, of freedom and justice and whatever it promises is gradually being extinguished. And I sure as hell don't want to see the arm come down horizontally with a post, get out and stay out. And that, I think, is what we're getting to and allowing to get it to.
Right.
And it is not what I think America stands for.
Amen. Henry Oster, the author of The Kindness of the Hangman. Hang on just a second, sir.
The Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
The website is thekindnessofthehangman.com. Henry, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure and honor. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, sir. We were a couple $1,000s short of our goal yesterday, like the day before, like on virtually all but 2 days out of this is the third week of our fundraising drive, and I need your help. We've got to hit these goals. We've got to keep this show on the air. We've got to keep this network going. It's just like we've got to do it, and it costs money to send electrons up to satellites. And back down to you, regardless of where you're getting the show, even on YouTube, there are expenses involved, and bills have to be paid. And if the bills don't get paid, then the electricity gets turned off. I mean, it's really that simple. So 877-378-8669 is our telephone number for Free Speech, or is Free Speech TV's telephone number. Also on their website, freespeech.org/donate. And we need your help. We need to make this network solid. This is the funding base for Free Speech TV. And, it's how we've done it for years and years. And so far it's worked. So far we've kind of hung on in there, And we're getting some really good results, by the way. I mean, you've got a Democratic socialist who just beat Joe Crowley. Joe Crowley, who's been on this show. Joe Crowley, who was one of the first Democrats to come out for Medicare for all, but was still taking money from big corporations. And, she came in and she said, no, I'm not going to do that. Boom, Joe Crowley's gone. The genuine progressive revolution that you see on this network is actually succeeding at taking over the Democratic Party, one seat at a time. We're doing it. We took over the platform in 2016 and pushed Hillary Clinton way to the left. Not far enough that, you know, unfortunately, that she could win the election. But, well, actually, she did win the election. She got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. And you know that whole story. I don't want to get into that. But the whole, and it wasn't Hillary, it was that whole machine, you know. But which is continuing to move to the left. I mean, you know, look at Tom Perez now. And so I see what we're doing as vital, as important, and as successful. We are changing the dialogue in the Democratic Party. You are changing the dialogue in the Democratic Party. I know this. This is why Mark Pocan comes back on this program every single week. It's why Bernie came back every single week. This show arguably launched Bernie's candidacy. It certainly turned him into a household name all across the country. There are literally millions of people listening to this program over the course of weeks it's over the course of a week. In fact, according to Talkers Magazine, it's 5.6 million on the radio just. And then, you know, here we are on Free Speech TV. We are changing things. We are having success. Let's not let this thing fail now. 877-378-8669 is the telephone number for Free Speech TV. Please call now. Contributions of any amount are more than welcome, whatever you can give. And if you can commit to a certain amount of money every month, you know, all the better. It's a great way to make a small monthly gift go a long, long way, because it really and truly does add up. The premiums are what we've had all week. The Free Speech TV is a true, did you hear that on Fox News Magnet with the $30 gift, with the $72 gift, the Free Speech TV water bottle. It's hard to find these water bottles that are actually made in the United States and that are chemical free. This one's really cool. It's why it's $72. It's actually a little more expensive premium for Free Speech TV, as opposed to a cheapy one, you know, made in China or something. With a $120 donation, you get a copy of my book, the Thom Hartmann Reader, collection of various writings pulled out of others of my books. And it's a great way to introduce me and my perspective to your friends, neighbors, you know, teachers, students, whatever it may be. And a great gift. That's with a $120 gift or $10 a month for a year. With a $240 gift or $20 a month for a year, you get Howard Zinn's A People's History book, plus the DVD that goes with it, plus Reverend William Barber's book, The Third Reconstruction. That could be $20 a month. With $360 gift or $30 a month for a year, you get all the books and the DVDs. My book, Reverend Barber's book, Howard Zinn's book, the DVD with a $480 gift or $40 a month for a year. You get the Everything Kit, which includes Fox News Magnet, water bottle, autographed book by me, William Barber's book, Howard Zinn's book, and the DVD. And with $1,000, come to Portland, and I'll take you to lunch. And you can sit here in the studio with us and watch the last hour of our program. It's kind of a hoot. Our studio is really a funky little humble thing, and but it's really worth seeing. So 877-378-8669. Please call now. Act now and get this T-shirt. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A brilliant tweet by John Lewis, the congressman. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. Hashtag good trouble. I think he's differentiating that from bad trouble, but it's a remarkable thing. The news is reporting, well, all the networks now, that Justice Kennedy has said that he's going to step down from the United States Supreme Court, which gives Donald Trump his second appointment in 2 years. This is distressing news. And in large part because the American people don't seem to understand the importance of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, if you read the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton talked at some length in the Federalists, the ones that are in the 70s or the low 80s. I think it's 74, but whatever. In that range, you'll find them. He did a series of 5 Federalist papers. They were published as newspaper articles at the time, but what we call the Federalist Papers. He did a series of 5 of them on the Supreme Court and the court system, because he and Hamilton and James Madison wrote most of these. John Jay wrote a couple, and there was somebody else who wrote 1 or 2. But basically, it was Hamilton and Madison, and they were trying to sell the Constitution. This was between 1787, when the Constitution was written, and 1789, when it was ratified. It took 2 years to get that thing passed and basically create a whole brand new form of government here in the United States, do away with the Articles of Confederation and bring in the Constitution. And when they wrote the Constitution and when they were selling the Constitution, there was some concern expressed by a number of people, by the people who referred to themselves as anti-federalists, and Thomas Jefferson was the leader of this pack, by the way. There was some concern that the Supreme Court could end up being essentially like monarchs, like kings, that they would have too much power. And they wanted to explicitly limit the power of the Supreme Court. And their concern, I mean, it wasn't that they were opposed to power in and of itself. They gave enormous power to Congress, the power to make war, the power to raise taxes, the power to spend money. They gave enormous power to the president, the power to be the commander-in-chief of the military. But they didn't, and they wanted the courts to have the power to be basically, you know, the court of last appeal and all that sort of thing. But they didn't want the courts to have too much power because they were not elected. The Supreme Court was appointed by the justices, are appointed by the president, ratified by the Senate. They're not elected. And so there was this concern. And if you read Madison's notes on the Constitutional Convention, which is a day-by-day, you know, summary of what happened and what the debates were, and a lot of verbatim quotes in there, you will see that there was a huge debate over this, over whether the Supreme Court should be answerable to the people in any way at all. And you had the Hamilton faction, essentially. Hamilton wanted the president to be a lifetime appointment. Hamilton actually thought that, you know, having kings was a good thing. The idea of hereditary kings, not necessarily a good thing, but having somebody who was so powerful that they could counterbalance the mob. You know, the danger of democracy, because there was a big discussion at that time about the danger of democracy. This hadn't been tried before in a real meaningful way, the way that they were doing it. That that there needed to be this king-like figure, and when Hamilton said that on the first day of the Constitutional Convention, he was laughed out of the convention. He got so PO'd about this that he went back to New York and stayed there for 2 months, and finally came back later. But he was so offended. But then he argued later that the Supreme Court should have this power, and he lost. And so in the Constitution, it says that Congress can override the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court says unions can't have rights, Congress can override them. If the Supreme Court says that, you know, the president can have his Muslim ban, Congress can override them. Now, I'm not expecting this Republican Congress to do that, but there's probably a Democratic Congress coming. Let's hope. And I think that Kennedy delayed his withdrawal from Congress, or from SCOTUS. He failed to delay it. Had he delayed his announcement until after November, then there's a possibility that Democrats in the Senate could have made sure that whoever Trump appoints is at least a reasonable person, not another Neil Gorsuch, who's the most right-wing and extreme member of the Supreme Court that we have seen since the slaughter court, since the 1920s. But instead, I'm sorry, the slaughterhouse cases back in the 1920s. But instead, what we are seeing in all probability now is that the Republicans will just jam this through really quickly. So back to the Constitution, this is something that Congress has not taken advantage of, to the best of my knowledge, in history. Now, there's some exceptions to that. There have been a few times when Congress has passed laws that have court stripping provisions in them. I was talking with Congressman Pocan about this earlier, where they literally write into the law, the new piece of legislation, this law is not subject to review by the United States Supreme Court. They block the Supreme Court. And you say, well, how can they do that? The Supreme Court is the final say. No, here's what the Constitution says. This is Article 2, which is Article 3, which is the judicial branch, Section 2, in which they establish the court system. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity under rising under this Constitution, blah, 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 blah. And then they get to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has original jurisdiction in just a very narrow area. Original jurisdiction means they're the first court you go to. In all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls, and those in which a state shall be a party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. So in other words, if New York State sues Connecticut, it goes right to the Supreme Court just like that. That's where they sue Connecticut. Or if an ambassador is involved in some case that ends up, in the U.S. court system, it goes right to the Supreme Court. But everything else, well, back to reading from the Constitution. In all other cases, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction. In other words, they're the final appeals court. Some other court has to have judged first, and then it gets appealed to the Supreme Court. It's where the buck stops. It's the final appeal, okay? In all other cases, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, both as to law and fact, with such exceptions. And sort of like the way Donald Trump does his tweets, he's actually borrowing the convention of the 1700s, of the constitutional era. They capitalize the word exceptions to say, this is really important. With such exceptions and under such regulations, and the word regulation is capitalized, as the Congress shall make. So Congress has an absolute power. It doesn't require a constitutional amendment, although that's the way to make it permanent. But the Congress has the absolute power to say, you pass Citizens United, we're going to pass a law striking down Citizens United, and we're going to embed in that law a sentence which says this law shall not be subject to judicial review by the United States Supreme Court. They can do that. It doesn't require anything other than simply doing it. And they can pass it with a simple majority, assuming it doesn't get filibustered in the Senate. And if it gets filibustered in the Senate, they need 10 extra votes. So there is a remedy. And I think, frankly, we should start talking about that remedy, particularly now that we seem to be, sliding back into these insane times. So anyhow, we had a long interview. I've talked a lot here. We've got a lot of callers who want to get in and have been on the hold for a long time. IBAN in Chicago. Thanks for holding for over an hour. I really appreciate it. What's on your mind?
You got me, Tom?
Yeah, I do. You're on the air.
Hey, brother. Great show.
Thank you.
Man, depressing day with Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But Colonel Wilkinson hit on the real problem. The corporate media completely ignores, Tom. American empire and, quote, the racket of war, USMC General Smedley Butler, unquote. If the United States got out of W's illegal war in the Middle East and Reagan's stupid war on drugs, we would not have millions of tired, hungry, huddled masses yearning to be free.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and the third thing that you have to add into that, and I absolutely agree with you, IBAN, The third part of that, though, is Ronald Reagan's foreign policy with regard to Nicaragua, Honduras, and Guatemala. He facilitated the invasion of these countries by right-wingers, by legions of right-wingers, ideologically and militarily, and supported the right-wingers within these countries, even providing them with weapons to take out democratically elected governments. I mean, thanks for the call. Very well said.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls as we roll toward the final 15 minutes of our program. Stick around. We'll be back. And welcome back. Maurice in East Dublin, Georgia. Hey, Maurice, thanks for watching us on our website. What's up? Maurice? Maurice, you have to listen to your phone. If you're listening to the radio or the internet stream or the satellite feed or whatever it may be, there is a time delay. I'm very sorry. Marlene in Spencerport, New York. Hey, Marlene, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I don't have much to say myself, but I want to say that I think everyone should listen to Steve Schmidt. He stated 5 points that lead to losing our democracy and becoming an autocracy, and he stressed the importance of the midterm election this year. So I would ask that everyone on the radio, on TV, would encourage people to look up Steve Schmidt, listen to him. He's very serious. He was a Republican strategist. He was on the McCain campaign, very reputable.
He ran the
man.
McCain campaign.
Yes. And he revoked his registration as a Republican and is now a Democrat, and that's very recently. I believe in the last week or two. I don't know if you heard his 5 points.
I have. I heard him last night on MSNBC, and I saw him this morning on Stephanie Ruhl's program. And on that program this morning, he didn't so much repeat those 5 points. Instead, they sat around and made fun of Bernie Sanders and other progressives, saying that they are lying progressives and liars because they're saying that we can have health care and free insurance and free health care insurance at no cost and higher education at no cost. He said that's a lie. There's no way to pay for it. Well, they do it all over Europe. They do it in Central America. How can we fail to do that? So Steve Schmidt may be right about Donald Trump being an autocrat and a proto-fascist. In fact, he is right about that. But that doesn't mean he's right about everything, and he's certainly no progressive.
No, I agree. I know he's not a progressive. And I agree he's not right about everything, but I do believe he's right about where this country is headed under Donald Trump and the Republicans in Congress.
Yeah, I mean, watching Steve Schmidt or listening to his words, I mean, what he is telling us is that Republicans, long-term Republicans, he's been in that party his whole life, as far as I know, are realizing that their party has been hijacked by a man who has no loyalty to a political party and, frankly, no loyalty to his own nation. He's violating all the norms and conventions of this country. And I think, Donald Trump wants to turn us into Erdogan's Turkey. And I think he's working very, very hard at it, saying, oh, we don't need, due process. Well, you sure will want due process if the police ever knock on your door. Marlene, I agree with you. And thank you for the call and for pointing out Steve Schmidt. It takes a lot of courage to take those kinds of political positions. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by X-Chair, the X-Chair office chair. xchairthom.com is the website, xchairthom.com. Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit tomsbeets.com. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Yeah, hey, Tom, that news about the Supreme Court is really bad. About the only thing more important to an autocrat than controlling the military is controlling the courts. But that's not what I called. I wanted to get your take on Germany. I wanted to get your take on Trump's ambassador to Germany, Richard Grenell, openly saying he is going to support the Alternative for Deutschland party. Now, I'm not trying to say they're fascist.
They are fascists.
Remember, well, okay. And remember how important
they embrace fascism. They don't embrace Hitlerism, but they embrace fascism, at least from what I know about them, yeah. It's a nationalist party.
Right, and then they're very anti-immigrant and everything. And remember how pivotal William Dodd was, Roosevelt's ambassador to Germany. Remember how he said, look, this stuff going on in Germany is not normal. He was very influential in that.
He was very outspoken about it.
Yeah.
Yes. Dave, I agree. I think Richard Grenell is, he's a right-wing hack, and Trump made him ambassador to Germany, and now the Germans are just flipped out about it. So, we'll see where it goes. Thanks for the call, Dave. Donald in Aurora, Illinois. Hey, Donald, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Quickly, this business about having 16-year-olds and even 14-year-olds vote is crazy.
I don't know anybody who's advocating 14-year-olds. I've heard of 16-year-olds, lowering the voting age to 16.
Okay. The thing is, even that's crazy. I was raised a Republican because my family all voted Republican, and it's almost like being raised as a Catholic. They would be highly influenced by their parents, like I was. I didn't vote a Democrat until after I voted for Richard Nixon. He was the last Republican.
Donald, I think that's much more true of people of I'm not sure how old you are, but of my generation, kids who grew up, with their only information source being one local newspaper and 3 TV channels. I think that's absolutely true. That's why I followed my father into the Republican Party when I was 13. It wasn't until I was 15 that I broke out of it.
During the Vietnam War, and that's why I voted for Nixon, because I thought he ended it.
But don't you think that the 16-year-olds today, with all this social media and everything, are much more well-informed? I mean, look at what these Parkland kids are doing.
Yeah.
I suspect that they have that to be 16 years old in today's world is a completely different thing than to be 16 years old was in the 60s, 70s, even the 80s and 90s. And as such, I personally think they're more well-informed. But it's a reasonable debate, Donald, and one we should have someday. But today, it's not the topic for the debate. So thank you for the call. Cece in Chicago. Hey, Cece, thanks for listening to WCPT. What's up?
Hi, I would like to add to the discussion by your previous guest. I think we have to strongly object to detainees at the border being placed into military installations. The military will be able to, and I suspect, since it's Trump's military, will deny access to everyone to these
Of course,
detainees.
It's federal land and it's surrounded by soldiers with guns.
We have to make noise about this. I don't think people realize it. The press won't be allowed in. Humans won't be allowed in. Family won't be allowed in unless they're military or got some Trump pre-approval thing going. Yeah. But I think this is, they can turn them into concentration camps, and we can't even have flyovers because you cannot fly over a military base.
You're absolutely right.
Get on
You're absolutely right. And you're absolutely right, Cece, and I totally agree with you. And this is something that is being largely ignored and probably, frankly, is a done deal. Kevin in Missouri. Hey, Kevin, what's up?
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Kevin.
I noticed that you're listed on FSTV as out of Portland, Oregon, live, but your phone number is out of Washington, D.C.
That's right.
Am I correct?
Yeah, it's because we did our show from D.C. for 7 years, and we just kept the phone number so people didn't have to memorize a new number. What's up?
Okay. Well, I'm bringing up a few things. I've been watching this for a while. During the summer, there's nothing on TV except repeats. So I got involved with your program. It's very interesting, but I want to bring up a few notes about the social issues with people. You know, we have a high suicide rate now, shootings in schools and such like that. And, there's a lot more involved with just politics, money, and everything else. Just people's social behavior. You're a product of your own environment. Yeah. So
Kevin, I completely agree with you. But let's have that conversation on a Friday. That's a great topic for a Friday. Maurice in East Dublin, Georgia. You have the last minute of the show, Maurice. What's up?
Well, thank you, and I'll use it hopefully efficiently. What has happened and what I demand of the Democratic Party establishment at this point is to pack the courts in 20 when there's a Democratic president and a Democratic-led Senate. They have no excuses now. Obviously, McConnell has flouted all rules and norms, quote unquote. Yeah. And so he's going to push his Supreme Court nominee through with 51 votes. Probably Manchin will vote for whomever in Heitkamp and whatever other red.
So are you suggesting, when you say pack the court, Maurice, are you suggesting the next that they should do what Roosevelt tried to do, which is expand the number of justices on the court from 9 to 12 or 13?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In 20, when there is a Democratic president and a Democratic-led Senate.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. Actually, I was wrong about Roosevelt. What Roosevelt did, and Maurice, thank you for the call. Excellent point. What Roosevelt did is he said that any justice over 70 years old would become a justice emeritus, because at that point, all the old guys were the ones who were blocking progress, and all of them together would get one vote. And then they would add new justices to bring the court up to 9 votes. And I'm not sure that that's the way you'd want to do it today, because that would probably exclude Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But who knows? We need to look at this, and we will talk about it tomorrow, no doubt. So thanks so much for being with us today. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. We need your help. Get out there, get active, tag. You're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Please support your local station. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by XChair, the XChair chair, office chair. XChairTom.com is the website, XChairTHOM.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.